Have you ever felt like you are playing a role in your own life? Like you are constantly adjusting yourself to fit what others expect from you, while the real version of you quietly waits somewhere in the background? Many people spend years trying to become someone impressive, successful, or accepted, but in the process they slowly lose connection with who they truly are. According to the wisdom of the Buddha, the moment you stop trying to be someone else and start discovering your true nature is the moment your real freedom begins. In this video, you will learn 7 powerful lessons that will guide you back to your authentic self and show you why becoming yourself may be the most powerful decision you will ever make. 1. The world will always try to shape you. From the moment you are born, the world begins shaping you. Your family teaches you what success should look like. Society tells you what kind of life you should pursue. People around you constantly project their expectations onto you. Over time, these voices become so loud that many people forget to ask one simple question: what do I truly want? The Buddha taught that suffering often begins when we lose awareness of our own path. Instead of listening to our inner wisdom, we begin living according to the expectations of others. This is why many people reach success, yet still feel empty inside. They followed a path that was designed by the world, not by their own understanding. Becoming yourself begins with recognizing this powerful truth. The world will always try to shape you, but your peace depends on whether you allow it to define you. When you become aware of this influence, something important happens. You begin separating your true voice from the noise of the world, and that awareness is the first step toward freedom. 2. Comparison is the enemy of your true nature. One of the fastest ways to lose your sense of self is through constant comparison with others. It often begins quietly and almost unconsciously. You see someone earning more money, someone gaining recognition, or someone living a life that appears happier and more successful than your own. Little by little, your mind starts measuring your worth against what you see around you, and without realizing it, your focus slowly shifts away from your own path. In the modern world, this habit has become even stronger. Social media, competition, and society's expectations constantly encourage people to compare their achievements, appearance, and lifestyle with others. But what we often forget is that we are only seeing a small part of someone else's life. We rarely see their struggles, doubts, or the difficulties they face behind the scenes. Yet our mind still uses those incomplete images as a standard to judge ourselves. The Buddha taught that comparison is one of the subtle traps created by the ego. It pulls your attention away from your own growth and places it on the lives of others. Every person in this world is walking a completely different path, shaped by unique experiences, talents, opportunities, and challenges. When you compare your journey with someone else's, you are measuring 2 completely different stories as if they were meant to be the same. The problem with comparison is that it quietly steals your peace. Instead of appreciating your progress, your mind begins to feel inadequate or dissatisfied. Instead of developing your natural strengths, you start chasing goals that may not even belong to you. But something powerful happens when you step out of this habit. The moment you stop comparing yourself with others, your attention returns to where it truly belongs, your own life. You begin noticing your own growth, your own direction, and the small improvements that were previously hidden by the noise of comparison. Your path does not need to look like anyone else's to be meaningful. Your journey is unique, and it unfolds in its own time and in its own way. When you truly accept this, your sense of identity becomes stronger, calmer, and far more stable than any temporary validation the world could offer. 3. Your authentic self already exists within you. Many people spend years believing they must build a completely new identity before they can feel valuable or confident. They think they need to become more impressive, more successful, or more like someone they admire. Because of this belief, they constantly try to reshape themselves to fit an image they think the world will respect. But Buddhist wisdom teaches something very different and much simpler. Your authentic self is not something you have to create from nothing. It already exists within you. It is the natural part of you that appears when you stop pretending, when you stop forcing yourself to meet everyone else's expectations, and when your mind becomes calm enough to listen to your own inner voice. Deep inside, you already have certain interests, values, and ways of thinking that feel natural to you. You may feel drawn towards certain ideas, activities, or ways of living that bring you peace and clarity. These are not random feelings. They are small signals from your authentic nature trying to guide you. The problem is that many people stop listening to these signals because the noise of the world becomes too loud. Expectations from family, pressure from society, and the desire to fit in often bury this natural voice under layers of fear and doubt. Over time, people become so focused on meeting outside expectations that they lose connection with what truly feels right to them. Becoming yourself is not about adding something new to your identity or transforming into someone extraordinary. In many ways, it is the opposite. It is about slowly removing the habits, fears, and expectations that were never truly yours. As those layers begin to fall away, your natural clarity begins to return. When this happens, life becomes simpler. Decisions become easier because they are no longer based on what others expect, but on what genuinely feels true to you. And the more you trust this inner voice, the stronger and clearer your authentic self becomes. 4. Freedom begins when you stop seeking approval. One of the strongest forces that quietly controls people's lives is the desire for approval. Many individuals spend years, sometimes even their entire lives, trying to shape themselves into someone that others will accept, admire, or praise. This habit often begins very early in life. As children, we learn that certain behaviors bring praise, while others bring criticism. Over time, the mind slowly learns to adjust itself based on how people react. At first, this seems harmless. It may even appear responsible or respectful. You learn to be polite, considerate, and cooperative with others. But the problem begins when your entire identity starts depending on how people respond to you. Instead of asking what truly feels right to you, your mind begins asking a different question. What will make people approve of me? When this pattern becomes strong, people start hiding their real opinions, suppressing their true interests, and abandoning their natural personality just to avoid judgment. Someone may stay silent even when they disagree because they fear conflict. Another person may choose a career path that others respect, even though it does not bring them any real fulfillment. Some people may even stay in unhealthy relationships simply because they fear disappointing others. The Buddha often spoke about the suffering that comes from attachment, and the attachment to approval is one of the most powerful attachments people carry. When your happiness depends on whether others accept you, your peace becomes extremely fragile. A single criticism can disturb your entire day. A negative opinion can shake your confidence. Your emotional stability begins depending on forces that are completely outside your control. But the truth is simple and powerful. No matter how carefully you behave, no matter how much effort you put into pleasing others, you will never be able to satisfy everyone. Every person sees the world through their own beliefs, experiences, and expectations. Some people will appreciate you, some will misunderstand you, others may criticize you for reasons that have nothing to do with who you truly are. Once you deeply understand this truth, something inside you begins to change. You realize that chasing universal approval is like trying to control the wind. It is impossible. And when you finally stop trying to win everyone's approval, you experience a level of freedom that many people never discover. This does not mean you become careless or disrespectful toward others. Buddhist wisdom never encourages arrogance or selfishness. Instead, it teaches balance. You can still treat people with kindness, compassion, and respect without allowing their opinions to control your identity. When the need for approval begins to fade, you gain something far more valuable than praise. You gain honesty. You gain the ability to speak your truth calmly, without fear. You gain the courage to make decisions that align with your values, instead of constantly adjusting yourself to match other people's expectations. Life becomes much lighter when you stop performing for the approval of the world. Your mind becomes calmer because it is no longer constantly monitoring how others might judge you. Your actions become clearer because they come from your own understanding rather than external pressure. The Buddha encouraged his followers to look within themselves for wisdom rather than constantly seeking validation from the outside world. True peace does not come from being accepted by everyone. True peace comes from living in alignment with your own nature. And when you reach that point, something powerful happens. You no longer need the world's permission to be yourself. You simply live your life honestly, quietly, and with confidence. 5. Silence reveals your true direction. In the modern world, silence has become extremely rare. From the moment people wake up in the morning until they fall asleep at night, their minds are surrounded by constant noise. Phones are always buzzing, notifications appear every few minutes, conversations fill every quiet moment, and endless streams of information keep the mind continuously occupied. Many people move through their entire day without experiencing even a few minutes of true mental stillness. Because of this constant noise, something very important slowly disappears: the ability to hear your own inner voice. The Buddha placed great importance on silence and stillness because he understood a simple but powerful truth about the human mind. When the mind is constantly distracted, it becomes confused about what truly matters. Thoughts begin racing in every direction, emotions become unstable, and decisions start being influenced by fear, pressure, and outside opinions rather than inner clarity. But when silence enters the mind, everything begins to change. Silence creates space. It allows your thoughts to slow down and your emotions to settle. In that quiet space, the mind begins to organize itself naturally. Problems that once seemed overwhelming start appearing simpler. Confusion begins turning into understanding. Many people avoid silence because it forces them to face themselves. When the noise disappears, the mind can no longer hide behind distractions. Thoughts, fears, and unanswered questions begin to surface. At first, this can feel uncomfortable, but according to Buddhist wisdom, this discomfort is not something to fear. It is actually the beginning of awareness. The Buddha often encouraged people to sit quietly with their minds, observing their thoughts without immediately reacting to them. Through this practice, people slowly begin to understand how their mind works. They begin noticing patterns of fear, worry, attachment, and desire that previously controlled them without their awareness. Once you begin observing your mind in silence, something remarkable starts to happen. You begin separating yourself from the endless stream of thoughts that constantly appear. You realize that not every thought deserves your attention, and not every emotion needs to control your actions. This realization brings a powerful sense of clarity. In silence, you also begin reconnecting with the deeper parts of yourself that were hidden under layers of distraction. You may start recognizing what truly makes you feel fulfilled, what values are most important to you, and what kind of life genuinely brings you peace. Often, the direction you have been searching for is not something that needs to be discovered in the outside world. It has been quietly waiting inside you the entire time. The problem was never that the answer did not exist. The problem was that your mind was too noisy to hear it. Silence acts like a mirror for the mind. It reflects your true thoughts, your real intentions, and your deepest motivations. The more time you spend in stillness, the clearer this reflection becomes. This is why many people who regularly practice meditation or quiet reflection begin experiencing a stronger sense of direction in their lives. Their decisions become simpler because they are no longer reacting to every external influence. Instead, they are responding from a place of inner understanding. Silence also strengthens your emotional balance. When your mind becomes familiar with stillness, it becomes easier to remain calm even when life becomes chaotic. Situations that once triggered strong reactions no longer control you as easily because your mind has learned how to return to a place of calm observation. The Buddha described the calm mind as one of the greatest forms of strength a person can develop. A mind that is quiet and aware can see reality more clearly than a mind that is constantly distracted. In silence, your authentic self slowly begins to reappear. The pressure to impress others weakens. The need to compare yourself with everyone else fades. Your life begins moving according to a rhythm that feels natural rather than forced. And over time, silence becomes more than just a moment of peace. It becomes a guide. It quietly points you toward the direction that truly belongs to you. 6. Becoming yourself requires courage. Becoming your true self is one of the most powerful journeys a person can take, but it is also one of the most challenging. Many people imagine that discovering who they truly are will immediately bring peace and clarity, and in many ways it does. But the path toward authenticity often requires something that many people are not prepared for at first. It requires courage. The reason courage is necessary is because becoming yourself often means stepping away from expectations that have shaped your life for many years. From childhood, people are taught how they should behave, what they should believe, and what kind of life they are supposed to pursue. Families may have certain expectations, society creates standards of success, and culture builds ideas about what is considered respectable or acceptable. Because of this, many people grow up following paths that were never truly their own. They study subjects they were told to study. They choose careers that appear impressive to others. They adopt habits and lifestyles that help them fit in with the people around them. At first, this may feel normal because everyone else seems to be doing the same thing. But deep inside, there is often a quiet voice that asks a different question. Is this truly the life that belongs to me? For many people, this voice is easy to ignore. It is often buried under responsibilities, expectations, and the fear of making the wrong decision. The mind may say, "This is what everyone expects from you," or "This is the safest path." Slowly, the voice of authenticity becomes quieter, while the voice of conformity becomes louder. The Buddha spoke about this struggle in a very profound way. He explained that much of human suffering comes from living according to illusions rather than understanding our true nature. When people spend their lives trying to become something they are not, their mind becomes restless and dissatisfied, even if everything on the outside appears successful. This is why courage becomes necessary. Courage is what allows a person to look honestly at their life and ask difficult questions. It is what allows someone to step away from expectations that no longer feel true. It is what gives a person the strength to explore their own path, even when that path is uncertain. One of the greatest fears people experience when becoming themselves is the fear of judgment. Human beings naturally want to belong. We want to feel accepted by our families, friends, and communities. Because of this desire, many people suppress their authentic personality in order to avoid criticism or rejection. Someone may hide their real interests because they worry others will not understand. Someone else may silence their opinions because they fear conflict. Another person may abandon a dream simply because it does not match what others expect from them. But the Buddha reminded his followers of a very important truth. The opinions of others are constantly changing. People see the world through their own beliefs, their own experiences, and their own expectations. Trying to satisfy every opinion is like trying to calm every wave in the ocean. It is impossible. Courage begins the moment you accept that you cannot control how others will see you. Some people will support your choices, while others may question them. Some will understand your path, while others may criticize it simply because it is different from their own. But when you begin living according to your true values rather than seeking approval, something powerful begins to happen inside you. Your mind becomes lighter. The constant pressure to maintain an image disappears. Instead of performing for the world, you begin living honestly. Another reason courage is necessary on the path of becoming yourself is uncertainty. When people follow traditional expectations, the path is often clearly defined. Society tells you what steps to follow and what success should look like. But when you begin listening to your own inner guidance, the path may not always be perfectly clear. There may be moments of doubt. There may be periods where you question whether you are making the right choices. But this uncertainty is not a sign that something is wrong. In many ways, it is a natural part of growth. The Buddha encouraged people to develop awareness and wisdom rather than blindly following established paths. He taught that true understanding comes from direct experience and reflection. This means that discovering your authentic self often requires exploring, learning, and adjusting as you move forward. Courage is not about having complete certainty. It is about moving forward even when the outcome is not fully known. It is about trusting that your inner understanding will gradually become clearer as you continue walking your path. Becoming yourself also requires courage because it often means letting go of old identities. Many people build their sense of self around roles they have played for years. They may see themselves primarily as a successful professional, a caretaker, or someone who constantly meets the expectations of others. But sometimes these identities become prisons rather than expressions of who we truly are. They keep us locked into patterns that no longer bring peace or fulfillment. Letting go of these identities can feel frightening at first because they provided a sense of stability and recognition. But Buddhist wisdom teaches that attachment to rigid identities often creates suffering. Life is constantly changing, and the self is not a fixed object, but a flowing process of growth and understanding. When you have the courage to release identities that no longer serve you, you create space for something more authentic to emerge. You allow your life to evolve naturally rather than forcing it to remain within outdated definitions. Another powerful aspect of courage on this path is learning to stand alone at times. When you begin living according to your authentic nature, there may be moments when fewer people understand your choices. Some friendships may change, some relationships may shift, but this does not mean you are truly alone. Often, becoming yourself simply changes the kind of connections you attract. When you live honestly, you begin drawing people who appreciate you for who you truly are, rather than who you pretend to be. This creates deeper and more meaningful relationships over time. The Buddha often emphasized that true strength is not loud or aggressive. It is quiet and steady. Courage on the path of self-discovery does not require dramatic rebellion against the world. It often appears as calm determination. It is the quiet decision to live truthfully, even when it would be easier to hide. When you practice this courage repeatedly, something remarkable begins to happen. Your confidence grows, not because you are trying to impress others, but because you trust your own understanding more deeply. Your mind becomes more peaceful, because your actions are no longer divided between what you feel inside and what you show outside. Life becomes simpler when there is no longer a gap between who you are and how you live. Becoming yourself is not a single moment of transformation. It is an ongoing journey of awareness, honesty, and growth. Every time you choose authenticity over imitation, you strengthen this journey. Every time you listen to your inner wisdom instead of external pressure, you move closer to living a life that truly belongs to you. And the beautiful truth is that courage becomes easier with time. The more you practice living honestly, the less power, fear, and judgment have over you. Eventually, authenticity becomes natural rather than difficult. At that point, becoming yourself no longer feels like a challenge. It feels like freedom. And that freedom is one of the greatest gifts a person can experience in this life. 7. Your true self is your greatest power. In many cultures, power is often misunderstood. People usually think of power as something external. They imagine power as wealth, influence, status, or the ability to control situations and people. Society constantly shows images of powerful individuals who appear confident, successful, and admired by many. Because of this, countless people spend their entire lives chasing these outer forms of strength, believing that once they achieve them, they will finally feel complete. But the Buddha taught a very different understanding of power. According to his wisdom, the greatest power a human being can develop does not come from controlling the world around them. It comes from understanding and mastering themselves. Many people appear strong on the outside while feeling deeply confused on the inside. They may achieve success, recognition, and admiration, yet their mind remains restless. They constantly worry about losing what they have gained. They feel pressure to maintain an image that others expect from them. They become trapped in a life where their identity depends on how the world sees them. This is why external power often fails to bring lasting peace. It is built on unstable ground. The moment circumstances change, the sense of power begins to shake. True strength comes from a much deeper place. When you truly become yourself, something powerful happens inside your mind. You no longer depend on constant validation from others. Your identity no longer shifts according to trends, opinions, or temporary achievements. Instead, your sense of self becomes grounded in understanding. The Buddha often spoke about the importance of knowing your own mind. Without this awareness, a person can easily be controlled by emotions, desires, and fears. Anger may suddenly take control of your behavior. Fear may prevent you from pursuing meaningful opportunities. Attachment may cause suffering when circumstances change. But when you begin understanding yourself deeply, these forces gradually lose their control over you. Imagine someone who constantly seeks approval. Their mood may rise when people praise them and fall when someone criticizes them. Their emotional stability depends entirely on the reactions of others. This kind of life can feel exhausting because your peace is always tied to something outside your control. Now, imagine a person who understands their own values and accepts themselves fully. When someone praises them, they appreciate it, but do not become dependent on it. When someone criticizes them, they calmly examine whether the criticism contains truth, but their self-worth does not collapse. This inner stability is a form of power that cannot easily be shaken. The Buddha described this type of strength as the calm mind. A calm mind does not react impulsively to every situation. It observes, understands, and responds wisely. This calm awareness creates clarity, and clarity allows a person to act with intention rather than emotional impulse. When you live as your authentic self, you no longer waste energy pretending to be someone else. Many people spend enormous mental energy maintaining an image that does not reflect who they truly are. They constantly monitor how they speak, how they behave, and how they present themselves, fearing that their real personality might not be accepted. This internal conflict creates tension within the mind. Part of you knows who you really are, while another part of you is busy performing a role for the world. But when you begin living authentically, that tension disappears. Your actions align naturally with your values and beliefs. You do not have to constantly monitor yourself because your behavior flows from genuine understanding rather than social performance. This alignment between your inner self and your outer life creates a powerful sense of peace. Another form of power that emerges from authenticity is clarity of direction. Many people feel lost in life because they are chasing goals that do not truly belong to them. They pursue careers, lifestyles, or achievements simply because they appear impressive to others. But when a person becomes connected with their true self, their decisions become clearer. They begin choosing paths that reflect their genuine interests and values rather than external pressure. This clarity creates a sense of purpose. Even when challenges appear, the person remains motivated because they know why they are walking that path. The Buddha also taught that understanding your true nature brings freedom from unnecessary suffering. Much of the pain people experience comes from trying to control things that cannot be controlled. People worry about the opinions of others, the outcomes of uncertain situations, and the constant changes of life. But when your identity is grounded in self-understanding, you become less attached to these unstable factors. You recognize that life will always change. Success and failure will both appear at different times. Praise and criticism will come and go. Because you understand this, you do not cling too tightly to either success or failure. You continue walking your path with calm awareness. This type of freedom is extremely powerful. It allows you to remain steady even when life becomes unpredictable. While others may panic when circumstances shift, your mind remains clear and balanced. Authenticity also strengthens your relationships with others. When you stop pretending to be someone else, the connections you build become more genuine. People interact with the real version of you rather than a carefully constructed image. Some relationships may naturally fade when you stop playing roles that once pleased others, but the relationships that remain often become deeper and more meaningful because they are built on honesty. The Buddha often emphasized compassion as an essential part of wisdom. Becoming yourself does not mean becoming isolated or indifferent toward others. Instead, self-understanding allows you to connect with others more sincerely. When you are comfortable with your own identity, you no longer feel threatened by the differences of others. You can respect different perspectives without feeling the need to compete or compare. Your mind becomes more open, patient, and compassionate. This creates a form of quiet strength that people naturally respect. Another important aspect of authentic power is resilience. Life will always bring challenges, difficult moments, unexpected changes, and personal losses are part of the human experience. No amount of preparation can remove all hardships from life, but when you know who you are, you face these challenges differently. Instead of collapsing under pressure, your mind remains grounded. You understand that difficulties are temporary experiences rather than permanent definitions of your identity. This perspective allows you to recover more quickly from setbacks. While others may become trapped in self-doubt or fear, your sense of self remains stable. Resilience built on authenticity is much stronger than confidence built on external success. The Buddha described enlightenment as a state where a person fully understands the nature of the mind and no longer becomes trapped by illusions. While complete enlightenment is a profound spiritual goal, the journey toward authenticity already brings many of its benefits. As you continue learning about yourself, your mind becomes less controlled by fear, comparison, and attachment. Your awareness becomes clearer, and your decisions become wiser. You begin to experience a deeper sense of freedom that many people never discover. At this point, success in life begins to take on a new meaning. Success is no longer measured only by achievements or recognition. Instead, success becomes the ability to live honestly, peacefully, and in alignment with your true nature. This kind of success cannot easily be taken away by changing circumstances, because it is built on understanding rather than external rewards. The beautiful truth is that every person has the potential to discover this power within themselves. It does not require special status, wealth, or extraordinary abilities. It simply requires awareness, honesty, and the courage to live authentically. The journey of becoming yourself may begin quietly. It may start with small moments of reflection, small decisions to follow your own understanding rather than external pressure. But over time, these small choices gradually reshape your entire life. Your mind becomes calmer, your direction becomes clearer, your relationships become more genuine, your resilience becomes stronger, and slowly, almost without realizing it, you begin experiencing the true power that the Buddha described, the power of self-understanding. When you fully embrace who you truly are, the world no longer controls your identity. You finally become free to live your life with clarity, peace, and purpose. 8. The journey of becoming yourself never truly ends. Many people imagine that becoming their true self is a single moment of realization, as if one day they will suddenly wake up and fully understand who they are. They believe that once they discover their purpose or identity, everything will become perfectly clear and remain that way forever. But according to the wisdom taught by the Buddha, the truth is far more profound and far more beautiful than that. Becoming yourself is not a single destination you arrive at once in your life. It is a living journey that continues to unfold every day. Human beings are not fixed or permanent. Your thoughts change, your understanding deepens, your experiences shape you, and your perspective evolves over time. Because of this, your authentic self is not a rigid identity carved in stone. It is a growing awareness of who you are becoming as you move through life with greater wisdom and clarity. Many people feel lost because they believe they must find one perfect version of themselves and hold on to it forever. When life changes or their interests evolve, they become confused, thinking they have somehow lost their identity. But Buddhist wisdom reminds us that change is the natural rhythm of life. Everything in existence is constantly moving, transforming, and unfolding. Just as seasons change throughout the year, human beings also pass through different seasons of understanding. The person you were 5 years ago is not the same person you are today. Your experiences have shaped you, your knowledge has expanded, and your awareness of life has grown. This natural transformation is not something to fear. It is evidence that you are alive and learning. The journey of becoming yourself means allowing this growth to happen consciously. Instead of resisting change or trying to freeze yourself into a single identity, you begin observing how your mind and your understanding evolve over time. You learn from your experiences rather than clinging to past versions of yourself. The Buddha often taught that wisdom arises through awareness. Awareness means watching your life unfold with curiosity rather than judgment. When something changes inside you, you do not immediately resist it or criticize yourself. Instead, you observe what this change is trying to teach you. For example, there may be activities you once loved that no longer bring you the same joy. There may be goals you once chased that no longer feel meaningful. Many people feel guilty when this happens because they believe they are abandoning something important. But often, this shift simply means your understanding has deepened. Becoming yourself means allowing your life to evolve as your awareness grows. Another important part of this journey is learning from your mistakes without allowing them to define you. Many people carry deep regret about decisions they made in the past. They replay old situations again and again, wishing they had acted differently. But the Buddha taught that regret becomes suffering when we attach ourselves too tightly to the past. The past cannot be changed, but the wisdom gained from it can shape the future. Every mistake contains a lesson if you are willing to see it clearly. When you view your life through this perspective, your past no longer becomes something to escape from. Instead, It becomes a teacher that helped shape the person you are today. The experiences that once caused pain may later become the very insights that guide you toward greater understanding. As you continue walking the path of becoming yourself, you also develop greater compassion toward yourself. Many people are extremely harsh with their own minds. They constantly criticize their flaws, compare themselves with others, and feel disappointed when they do not meet certain expectations. But true self-discovery cannot grow in an environment of constant self-judgment. Just as a plant cannot grow in harsh conditions without sunlight and water, your authentic self cannot flourish under endless criticism. The Buddha encouraged kindness not only toward others but also toward your own mind. When you treat yourself with patience and understanding, you create a mental space where growth becomes possible. Instead of demanding perfection, you begin appreciating progress. This gentle attitude toward yourself allows your authentic identity to develop naturally rather than through force. Another powerful realization on this journey is that your true self is not defined by external labels. Society often tries to categorize people into fixed identities based on profession, status, or achievements. People may describe themselves primarily as their job title, their social role, or their reputation in the world. But these labels only describe certain aspects of your life. They do not capture the deeper awareness that exists within you. The Buddha explained that the deeper nature of the mind goes beyond temporary identities. Your true self is not limited to what you do for a living, how much money you earn, or how others describe you. Those things may change many times throughout your life. What remains constant is your awareness, the observing presence within you that experiences thoughts, emotions, and events. As you become more aware of this deeper presence, your identity begins to feel more stable and peaceful. External circumstances may change, but your sense of self is no longer built entirely upon them. This understanding brings a profound sense of freedom. You realize that you are not trapped inside the roles the world assigns to you. You are a constantly evolving being with the ability to grow, learn, and transform. The journey of becoming yourself also deepens your relationship with the present moment. Many people spend most of their lives either replaying the past or worrying about the future. Their mind is rarely fully present in the experience of life itself. But the Buddha emphasized that true awareness exists in the present moment. When your mind becomes fully present, you begin experiencing life more clearly. You notice the details of each moment that previously passed unnoticed. The warmth of sunlight, the sound of wind moving through trees, the simple rhythm of breathing. These small experiences begin to reveal a quiet beauty that was always present but often ignored. When you live more fully in the present moment, your life begins to feel richer and more meaningful. Instead of constantly chasing a future identity or regretting a past version of yourself, you experience the unfolding of your life as it is happening. This presence strengthens your connection with your authentic self because your awareness is no longer scattered across endless worries and comparisons. Over time, this journey leads to a deeper understanding of freedom. Many people believe freedom means having unlimited choices or complete control over circumstances. But Buddhist wisdom teaches that real freedom comes from understanding the nature of your mind. When you understand how your thoughts, emotions, and attachments influence your experience, you gain the ability to respond wisely rather than reacting impulsively. You are no longer controlled by every passing emotion or fear. Instead, your awareness creates space between what happens and how you respond. This space is where wisdom lives, and through this wisdom, your authentic self continues to unfold. The beautiful truth about becoming yourself is that there is no final point where the journey ends. Each stage of life reveals new lessons, new insights, and new opportunities for growth. Your understanding continues deepening As long as you remain open and aware, rather than searching for a perfect version of yourself, you begin embracing the continuous process of learning who you are becoming. And when you live your life with this mindset, every experience becomes meaningful. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to grow. Every moment becomes part of the unfolding story of your life. The journey of becoming yourself is not something you finish. It is something you live. 9. The courage to walk your own path. One of the most difficult yet most transformative steps in the journey of becoming yourself is learning to walk your own path, even when that path looks different from what others expect. Many people spend their entire lives moving in directions that were designed by society, family expectations, or cultural traditions. These paths often appear safe and familiar because millions of people have followed them before. But the Buddha taught that a life lived only according to imitation can never bring true understanding or inner peace. Human beings naturally seek belonging. From a young age, we learn that acceptance often depends on behaving in ways that others recognize and approve. When someone follows the same lifestyle, beliefs, and ambitions as those around them, they are usually welcomed and supported. But when someone begins exploring their own direction, questions often appear. People may ask why you are choosing a different path. Some may express concern, while others may openly criticize your choices. This is why walking your own path requires courage. It is not simply about making independent decisions. It is about accepting that not everyone will immediately understand your journey. Many people fear this moment of misunderstanding because they worry that choosing their own path will isolate them from others. But the Buddha explained that true understanding often requires stepping away from the crowd long enough to see life more clearly. The world moves quickly, and most people follow established patterns without questioning them deeply. They move from one stage of life to another according to familiar expectations. They pursue careers that promise recognition, adopt lifestyles that appear respectable, and measure success through comparisons with others. These patterns can create a sense of stability, but they can also prevent deeper reflection about what truly brings meaning and peace. When a person begins questioning these patterns, something powerful begins to awaken inside them. They start asking deeper questions about life. What truly matters to me? What kind of life feels honest and meaningful? What values do I want my actions to reflect? These questions are not always easy to answer. In fact, they often lead to moments of uncertainty. But according to Buddhist wisdom, uncertainty is not something to fear. It is often the beginning of real awareness. Walking your own path means allowing yourself to explore these questions without rushing toward easy answers. It means observing your experiences, listening to your inner understanding, and gradually discovering the direction that aligns with your true nature. This process requires patience. In a world that often demands quick decisions and immediate results, the journey of self-discovery moves at a different pace. The Buddha encouraged his followers to develop mindfulness and reflection rather than rushing through life without awareness. Mindfulness means paying attention to your thoughts, emotions, and experiences with clarity. When you observe your life with mindfulness, you begin noticing what truly energizes you and what quietly drains your spirit. Certain activities may bring a sense of fulfillment that feels natural and meaningful. Other pursuits may bring temporary recognition but leave you feeling empty inside. Through this awareness, your path slowly becomes clearer. However, walking your own path also requires letting go of certain illusions about life. Many people believe that once they choose a direction, everything should immediately become easy and certain. But life rarely unfolds that way. Every path contains challenges, obstacles, and unexpected changes. The Buddha often reminded his followers that suffering arises when we expect life to remain comfortable and predictable. When difficulties appear, people sometimes interpret them as signs that they have chosen the wrong direction. But challenges are part of every meaningful journey. When you are walking your authentic path, challenges do not necessarily mean you are lost. Often they are simply opportunities for growth. They teach resilience, patience, and wisdom. Each obstacle you face helps strengthen your understanding of yourself and the world around you. Another important part of walking your own path is learning to trust your inner awareness. Many people constantly look outside themselves for instructions about how to live. They seek approval, guidance, and validation from others before making decisions. While advice can sometimes be helpful, relying entirely on external opinions can weaken your ability to listen to your own wisdom. The Buddha encouraged individuals to examine teachings carefully rather than accepting them blindly. He taught that wisdom arises when a person observes reality directly and reflects on their own experience. When you begin trusting your inner awareness, your confidence grows naturally. This confidence does not come from believing you are always right. Instead, it comes from knowing that you are honestly exploring your life with awareness and sincerity. Even if mistakes occur along the way, those mistakes become valuable lessons rather than permanent failures. Walking your own path also transforms your relationship with fear. Fear often appears whenever you step outside familiar patterns. The mind may imagine countless negative possibilities. It may question whether you are capable of succeeding or whether others will judge your choices. But fear is often simply a signal that you are entering new territory. Growth rarely happens within the boundaries of complete comfort. When you face fear with awareness rather than avoidance, you gradually discover that many of the fears you carried were far larger in your imagination than in reality. Each time you move forward despite fear, your courage strengthens. Over time, you begin realizing that the opinions of others no longer have the same power over your decisions. This does not mean you become indifferent or dismissive toward people around you. Instead, it means that your identity is no longer shaped entirely by their expectations. You learn to listen respectfully to different perspectives while still honoring your own understanding. As your path becomes clearer, something else begins to change inside you. You develop a deeper sense of responsibility for your life. When you are no longer simply following patterns designed by others, you recognize that your choices are shaping your future directly. This awareness can feel both empowering and challenging. On one hand, it reminds you that you have the freedom to shape your life according to your values. On the other hand, it also means accepting responsibility for the consequences of your decisions. But this responsibility is not a burden. It is actually a form of liberation. When you accept responsibility for your life, you no longer feel like a passive participant in your own story. Instead, you become an active creator of your path. Your actions become intentional rather than automatic. This sense of intention creates a deeper connection with the present moment. The Buddha often taught that true wisdom emerges when people live with awareness rather than distraction. When you walk your own path with awareness, each moment becomes meaningful. You are not simply rushing toward future achievements. You are experiencing the journey itself with clarity. Over time, the courage required to walk your path becomes quieter and more natural. At first, choosing authenticity may feel like a bold decision, but as you continue practicing honesty with yourself, authenticity becomes your normal way of living. You no longer feel the need to constantly prove yourself or compete with others. Instead, your energy becomes focused on growth, understanding, and meaningful action. The beautiful truth is that when you walk your own path sincerely, you often inspire others to do the same. People around you may notice the calm confidence that emerges from living authentically. Your example may encourage them to reflect on their own lives and explore their own journey of self-discovery. In this way, walking your path does not separate you from the world. Instead, it contributes something valuable to it. Every person who chooses awareness over imitation adds a small amount of wisdom to the collective human experience. The Buddha's teachings remind us that life is not a race to reach a particular destination. It is a journey of understanding. Each step taken with awareness brings deeper clarity about who we are and how we wish to live. When you choose the courage to walk your own path, you are choosing a life guided by wisdom rather than fear. You are choosing authenticity instead of imitation. And with every step forward, you come closer to the quiet freedom that the Buddha described, the freedom of living a life that truly belongs to you. 10. Living in alignment with your true nature. One of the most profound transformations that happens when a person truly begins the journey of becoming themselves is the shift toward living in alignment with their true nature. Many people move through life feeling a constant sense of inner conflict. On the outside, they may appear successful, responsible, and socially accepted, yet inside their mind there is tension. Something feels slightly out of place, as if the life they are living does not fully match the person they truly are. This inner conflict is more common than many people realize. It happens when the choices we make in life are guided more by external expectations than by inner understanding. Society often encourages people to follow certain definitions of success, and over time, many individuals shape their lives according to those definitions without questioning whether they truly resonate with their own values. A person may choose a career because it brings admiration from others rather than genuine fulfillment. Someone may maintain relationships that no longer feel healthy simply because they fear being judged for leaving. Others may pursue lifestyles that appear impressive while quietly feeling disconnected from their own sense of meaning. When this pattern continues for many years, the mind begins to feel divided. One part of you knows what feels honest and authentic, while another part continues performing a role designed to satisfy external expectations. This division creates mental exhaustion because the mind is constantly maintaining a version of yourself that does not fully reflect who you are. The Buddha taught that much of human suffering arises from this very kind of inner conflict. When your actions move in a direction that contradicts your deeper understanding, the mind becomes restless. Even if you achieve success according to the world's standards, a quiet dissatisfaction remains. But when you begin living in alignment with your true nature, something powerful begins to shift. The tension inside your mind slowly begins to dissolve. Your actions start reflecting your values more clearly. Your decisions feel more natural rather than forced. Living in alignment with yourself does not mean that life suddenly becomes perfect or effortless. Challenges will still appear, and difficult situations will still arise. However, when your life reflects your authentic values, you face those challenges with a much stronger sense of clarity and stability. Instead of constantly questioning whether you are living the right life, you begin trusting your direction. This trust does not come from arrogance or blind confidence. It comes from the quiet understanding that your actions are guided by honesty rather than pressure. One of the reasons alignment brings such deep peace is because it simplifies the mind. When your inner beliefs and your outward actions match each other, the mind no longer needs to maintain conflicting identities. You do not need to constantly monitor how you present yourself to others. Your behavior flows naturally from who you truly are. The Buddha often described this state as living with integrity. Integrity means that your words, thoughts, and actions move together in harmony. There is no hidden struggle between what you believe and how you behave. This harmony creates a deep sense of calm. Many people underestimate how powerful this calm can be. When the mind is free from constant inner conflict, your energy becomes focused. You are no longer wasting mental effort trying to maintain appearances or please everyone around you. Instead, your attention can be directed toward meaningful growth and understanding. Living in alignment also changes the way you make decisions. Many people feel overwhelmed by decisions because they are constantly trying to predict how others will react. They worry about criticism, judgment, or disappointing the expectations placed upon them. But when your decisions are guided by your own values, the process becomes clearer. You begin asking a different set of questions. Instead of asking, "Will everyone approve of this choice?" you begin asking, "Does this choice reflect who I truly want to be?" This shift in perspective simplifies many situations that once seemed complicated. For example, if honesty is one of your core values, decisions involving honesty become straightforward. Even if telling the truth may create temporary discomfort, you understand that living honestly brings long-term peace. Similarly, if compassion is important to you, your interactions with others naturally reflect kindness and patience rather than reactive anger. Your values become a compass that guides your actions. The Buddha encouraged his followers to develop wisdom and compassion together because these qualities help maintain alignment with one's true nature. Wisdom allows you to see situations clearly, while compassion reminds you to treat both yourself and others with understanding. Together, they create balance. Another important aspect of living in alignment is learning to respect your own boundaries. Many people experience inner conflict because they constantly ignore their own limits. They say yes to obligations that drain their energy. They remain in environments that damage their peace. They sacrifice their well-being in order to avoid disappointing others. But respecting your boundaries is not selfish. It is a necessary part of living honestly. When you protect your mental and emotional well-being, you preserve the clarity required to live authentically. The Buddha taught that balance is essential in all aspects of life. Excessive sacrifice without awareness can create suffering just as easily as selfishness can. Alignment means understanding when to give and when to step back. It means recognizing when something supports your growth and when something quietly pulls you away from your true nature. As you continue living in alignment with yourself, another transformation begins to appear. Your confidence becomes deeper and quieter. Unlike confidence built on external achievements, this kind of confidence does not depend on constant success. Even when mistakes happen, your sense of self remains stable because it is rooted in honesty rather than perfection. This stability also strengthens your resilience during difficult times. Life will always contain uncertainty. Situations may change unexpectedly, and challenges may appear without warning. But when you are aligned with your true values, these changes do not shake your identity as easily. You know who you are and what matters to you, so your direction remains clear even when circumstances shift. The Buddha often reminded his followers that true strength does not come from controlling the external world, but from understanding the internal world of the mind. When your mind is clear and aligned, external challenges lose much of their power to disturb your peace. Another beautiful result of alignment is the sense of meaning that begins to grow in your life. Many people search endlessly for purpose because they believe it must come from grand achievements or recognition, but purpose often emerges naturally when your actions reflect your authentic values. A person who values compassion may find purpose in helping others. Someone who values creativity may feel fulfilled through artistic expression. Another individual may discover meaning in teaching, learning, or contributing to their community. Purpose does not need to look the same for everyone. It simply needs to reflect what genuinely resonates with your heart and mind. When you live in alignment with your true nature, even small actions can feel meaningful. Everyday choices become opportunities to express your values and understanding. Your life begins to feel less like a performance and more like an honest expression of who you are. The Buddha's teachings remind us that peace does not come from trying to become someone else. It comes from understanding and accepting your true nature with clarity and compassion. When you live in alignment with that understanding, your mind becomes calmer, your actions become wiser, and your life begins to flow with a natural sense of harmony. You are no longer fighting against yourself. You are simply living your truth. 11. The peace that comes from accepting who you truly are. One of the deepest forms of freedom a person can experience in life is the peace that comes from accepting who they truly are. Many people spend years, sometimes even decades, quietly struggling with themselves. They feel as if they must constantly improve, constantly prove their worth, constantly reshape themselves into someone more acceptable or impressive. The mind keeps whispering that who they are right now is not enough. Because of this belief, life becomes a continuous effort to become someone else. This inner struggle often begins very early. As children grow up, they quickly learn that certain behaviors receive praise while others receive criticism. A child who performs well in school may be rewarded with approval and encouragement. A child who behaves differently may be corrected or discouraged. Over time, the mind begins forming an idea that acceptance depends on meeting certain expectations. As people grow older, these expectations multiply. Society encourages people to compare themselves with others, to compete for recognition, to measure their worth through achievements, wealth, appearance, or popularity. Without realizing it, many individuals begin shaping their identity around these standards. They try to become the person they believe the world will respect. But this process often creates a silent tension inside the mind. When you constantly try to become someone else, you slowly move further away from your authentic self. Your natural personality becomes hidden under layers of imitation and expectation. On the outside, everything may appear successful, but inside the mind feels restless. The Buddha recognized this struggle deeply. He observed that much of human suffering comes from resisting reality, including the reality of who we truly are. People often believe that happiness will appear only when they finally become the person they think they should be. But this belief creates an endless chase. There will always be another standard to meet, another comparison to win, another improvement to achieve. The mind becomes trapped in a cycle where satisfaction always feels just out of reach. The Buddha's teachings offer a powerful alternative. Instead of endlessly chasing a perfect version of yourself, he encouraged people to develop awareness and acceptance of their true nature. Acceptance does not mean refusing to grow or improve. It means understanding yourself honestly without constant judgment. When you begin accepting yourself, something important changes inside your mind. The constant pressure to prove your worth begins to fade. You no longer feel the need to compete with everyone around you. Instead, your attention shifts toward understanding your own thoughts, emotions, and values. This shift brings an unexpected sense of calm. Acceptance allows the mind to relax because it is no longer fighting against itself. Many people are unaware of how much energy they spend resisting their own feelings, criticizing their own personality, or comparing themselves with others. When that resistance disappears, a large amount of mental tension is released. The Buddha often taught that peace arises when the mind stops clinging to unrealistic expectations. When you accept yourself as you are in the present moment, you create a stable foundation for growth. Instead of trying to force yourself into a different identity, you begin working with your natural strengths and understanding your limitations with compassion. This compassion toward yourself is extremely important. Many people treat others with kindness and patience while being harsh and unforgiving toward themselves. They criticize every mistake and dwell on every perceived flaw. But true self-understanding requires patience. Just as a teacher gently guides a student toward learning, you must learn to guide your own mind with understanding rather than punishment. When mistakes happen, They become opportunities for learning rather than reasons for self-rejection. The Buddha emphasized that awareness and compassion must develop together. Awareness helps you recognize patterns in your behavior, while compassion allows you to respond to those patterns wisely rather than harshly. When you accept yourself honestly, you also become less dependent on external approval. Many people seek constant reassurance from others because they have not yet developed trust in themselves. They look for validation through compliments, recognition, and praise. But external validation is temporary. It comes and goes, depending on circumstances and opinions. Self-acceptance creates a much more stable form of confidence. When you accept who you are, your sense of worth no longer depends entirely on how others see you. Praise becomes pleasant, but not necessary. Criticism may still appear, but it does not destroy your sense of identity. Your mind becomes steady. This steadiness creates emotional balance. Instead of reacting strongly to every opinion or event, you begin responding with calm awareness. When something positive happens, you appreciate it without becoming overly attached. When something difficult happens, you face it with patience rather than panic. The Buddha described this balance as equanimity, a state where the mind remains peaceful regardless of changing circumstances. Self-acceptance also allows you to understand your emotions more clearly. Many people try to hide or suppress emotions they believe are unacceptable. They may feel ashamed of anger, sadness, or fear, so they attempt to push these feelings away. But suppressed emotions do not disappear. They remain inside the mind, influencing behavior in subtle ways. Acceptance means allowing yourself to acknowledge your emotions honestly without letting them control you. When you recognize an emotion clearly, you can observe it rather than becoming overwhelmed by it. For example, if anger arises, awareness allows you to see the anger without immediately acting on it. You can examine why it appeared and decide how to respond wisely. This process strengthens emotional intelligence and self-control. Another important benefit of self-acceptance is the freedom it brings to your relationships with others. When you are comfortable with who you are, you no longer feel the need to constantly impress or compete with those around you. Your interactions become more genuine. Instead of performing a role designed to gain approval, you simply express yourself honestly. This authenticity creates deeper connections because people are interacting with the real version of you rather than a carefully constructed image. Some relationships may naturally change when you begin living authentically. People who were comfortable with your previous role may find the new version of you unfamiliar. But over time, authenticity attracts individuals who appreciate you for who you truly are. These relationships often become more meaningful and supportive. Self-acceptance also strengthens your resilience during difficult times. Life inevitably includes moments of failure, disappointment, and loss. When your identity depends on perfection or external success, these experiences can feel devastating. But when you accept yourself fully, mistakes do not define your worth. You understand that growth often comes through challenges. Each difficulty becomes a lesson rather than a permanent label. This perspective creates psychological strength. The Buddha often reminded his followers that everything in life is impermanent. Success and failure, pleasure and pain, praise and criticism all arise and pass away. Understanding this impermanence helps the mind remain balanced during both good and difficult times. Self-acceptance supports this understanding because it reduces the need to constantly control how life unfolds. When you accept who you are, you also become more open to continuous growth. Ironically, acceptance often creates more meaningful improvement than constant self-criticism. When the mind feels safe and supported, it becomes more willing to explore new ideas, learn from experiences, and develop new skills. Growth becomes a natural process rather than a desperate attempt to prove your worth. The Buddha taught that wisdom develops through awareness, patience, and compassion. Self-acceptance creates the environment where these qualities can grow. Your life becomes less about becoming perfect and more about understanding yourself deeply. And in that understanding, a quiet peace begins to appear. It is the peace of knowing that you do not need to become someone else to deserve happiness. You simply need to understand and accept the person you already are. That acceptance becomes the foundation for a life lived with clarity, authenticity, and calm confidence. 12. The quiet freedom of being fully yourself. At the end of the long journey of self-discovery, something remarkable begins to unfold inside a person's life. It is not loud or dramatic. It does not appear as a sudden explosion of success or recognition from the world. Instead, it arrives quietly, like a calm sunrise after a long night. This transformation is the quiet freedom that comes from finally being fully yourself. Many people spend most of their lives carrying invisible weight. This weight does not come from physical burdens, but from mental pressure. The pressure to appear strong when they feel vulnerable. The pressure to meet expectations that were never truly their own. The pressure to behave according to roles that society assigned to them long ago. Over time, these pressures slowly shape the way people live. They adjust their personality to avoid judgment. They silence their real thoughts to prevent conflict. They chase goals that bring admiration rather than fulfillment. From the outside, everything may seem perfectly organized, but inside the mind, there is a quiet sense of exhaustion. This exhaustion happens because pretending to be someone else requires constant effort. The mind must continuously monitor how you speak, how you behave, and how others perceive you. It becomes a performance that never truly ends. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to maintain an image. Every decision becomes a calculation about how it will be judged. But when a person reaches the point where they begin living as their authentic self, that performance slowly comes to an end. The Buddha often spoke about liberation from illusion. Illusion does not only refer to misunderstanding the nature of the world, it also refers to misunderstanding the nature of ourselves. Many people believe they must construct a perfect identity before they can feel worthy of happiness. But the truth is much simpler. You do not need to become someone extraordinary in order to live a meaningful life. What brings the deepest peace is living honestly according to your true nature. When you allow yourself to be fully who you are, something remarkable happens. The tension between your inner world and your outer life begins to disappear. You no longer feel divided between what you truly feel and what you show to the world. Your life begins to feel whole. This wholeness brings a powerful sense of freedom. For the first time, your actions are not guided primarily by fear of judgment or desire for approval. Instead, they are guided by understanding. You choose kindness because it reflects your values, not because you are trying to appear virtuous. You speak honestly because truth feels natural, not because you are trying to impress anyone. This kind of freedom is quiet, but incredibly powerful. The Buddha described this state as freedom from attachment. Many people misunderstand attachment as simply loving or caring about things. But attachment, in the deeper sense, refers to the need to cling to identities, expectations, and outcomes in order to feel secure. When you are attached to a certain image of yourself, you constantly worry about protecting that image. When you are attached to recognition, you constantly seek praise. When you are attached to success, failure becomes terrifying. But when you learn to live as your authentic self, many of these attachments begin to loosen their grip. You begin realizing that your value does not depend on how the world defines you. Your worth does not fluctuate based on temporary achievements or mistakes. This realization brings a deep sense of calm. Life becomes simpler because your identity is no longer tied to every changing circumstance. Praise may come, but it does not inflate your ego. Criticism may appear, but it does not destroy your confidence. You remain balanced because your sense of self is rooted in understanding rather than approval. Another beautiful aspect of this freedom is the clarity it brings to your decisions. Many people struggle with decision-making because they are trying to satisfy too many expectations at once. They worry about disappointing family members, losing social approval, or choosing a path that appears unconventional. This constant pressure can make even small decisions feel overwhelming. But when you are fully connected with your authentic self, decision-making becomes much clearer. Your values act as a guide. Instead of asking, "What will everyone think about this choice?" you begin asking, "Does this choice align with the life I want to live?" This shift removes a large amount of confusion. Even when decisions are difficult, they feel meaningful because they are guided by understanding rather than fear. Living as your authentic self also strengthens your connection with the present moment. Many people spend most of their lives mentally traveling between the past and the future. They replay old regrets or worry endlessly about upcoming events. But when you are no longer trapped in the struggle to maintain an artificial identity, your mind becomes calmer. This calmness allows you to experience life more fully as it unfolds. You begin noticing simple moments that once passed unnoticed. The warmth of sunlight on your skin, the quiet rhythm of your breath, the sound of wind moving through trees, or the peaceful silence of early morning. These experiences may seem small, but they bring a deep sense of presence. The Buddha emphasized mindfulness because it reconnects people with the present moment. When your mind is no longer overwhelmed by comparison, approval, and fear, you can experience life directly rather than constantly analyzing it. This presence creates a deeper appreciation for life itself. Another transformation that occurs when you become fully yourself is the change in how you relate to others. When people live behind masks, their relationships often become performances as well. Conversations revolve around maintaining appearances rather than genuine understanding. But authenticity invites authenticity. When you are comfortable being yourself, others feel safer doing the same. Conversations become more honest. Connections become deeper because they are based on real understanding rather than social roles. You begin forming relationships that nourish your growth rather than drain your energy. The Buddha often emphasized compassion as an essential part of wisdom. Authentic living does not mean becoming isolated or indifferent to others. Instead, it allows you to connect with others from a place of sincerity and empathy. Because you understand your own struggles, you become more patient with the struggles of others. Because you have accepted your own imperfections, you become less judgmental toward the imperfections of the people around you. This compassion creates a peaceful environment wherever you go. Over time, the quiet freedom of being yourself also changes how you view success. Many people believe success means constantly achieving more, gaining more recognition, and climbing higher in the social hierarchy. But once you experience the peace of authenticity, success begins to look different. Success becomes living with clarity rather than confusion. Success becomes waking up each day without the need to pretend. Success becomes maintaining inner peace even when life becomes unpredictable. These forms of success cannot be measured by external standards, but they bring a deeper fulfillment than any temporary achievement. The Buddha taught that true liberation comes from understanding the nature of the mind and releasing the illusions that create suffering. When you become fully yourself, you are gradually releasing one of the greatest illusions, the belief that you must be someone else to deserve happiness. You discover that happiness does not come from imitation. It comes from understanding. It comes from acceptance. And it comes from living honestly according to your true nature. This quiet freedom may not attract loud applause from the world, but it brings something far more valuable. It brings peace. And once you experience that peace, You realize that becoming yourself was never about changing who you are. It was about finally allowing yourself to be. 13. Returning to the self you never truly lost. At a certain point in the journey of self-discovery, many people realize something surprising. The process of becoming yourself is not actually about building a completely new identity. It is not about transforming into a different person or inventing a personality that never existed before. Instead, it is about returning to a part of yourself that was always there but slowly became hidden under layers of conditioning, fear, expectation, and distraction. From the moment we enter the world, life begins shaping us. Family traditions, cultural values, education systems, and social expectations all influence the way we see ourselves. These influences are not necessarily harmful. In many ways, they help us survive and function within society. They teach us language, responsibility, and cooperation. But over time, these external influences can also create confusion about who we truly are. As people grow older, they often begin adapting themselves to meet the expectations around them. They learn which behaviors bring praise and which ones bring criticism. They adjust their personality to gain acceptance. Slowly, without even realizing it, they begin building a version of themselves designed primarily to fit into the world rather than to understand their own inner nature. The Buddha observed this pattern deeply in human life. He saw that people often lose touch with their natural awareness because they become absorbed in roles and identities that were never meant to define them completely. Someone may begin identifying themselves entirely as their profession, their social position, or the opinions others have about them. But these identities are temporary. Jobs change. Social status shifts. Public opinions fluctuate constantly. When a person's sense of self is built entirely on these changing elements, their identity becomes fragile. A single failure or criticism can feel devastating because it threatens the very foundation of how they see themselves. This is why the journey of becoming yourself is often described as a return rather than a construction. It is a gradual process of peeling away layers that no longer reflect your true nature. Imagine a clear mirror that has been covered with dust for many years. The mirror itself has not changed. It has always possessed the ability to reflect clearly. But the accumulated dust prevents that reflection from appearing. Your authentic self is similar to that mirror. It has always existed beneath the surface of expectations, fears, and habits that slowly gathered over time. Through awareness, patience, and reflection, these layers begin to fade. The mirror begins to reveal its clarity again. One of the most powerful tools for this return is mindfulness. The Buddha placed enormous importance on mindfulness because it helps people observe their own minds without becoming lost in them. When you practice mindfulness, you begin noticing your thoughts, emotions, and reactions as they appear. Instead of automatically believing every thought your mind produces, you begin observing those thoughts with curiosity. You notice patterns that previously operated in the background of your awareness. For example, you may notice how often your mind compares you to others. You may see how quickly fear appears when facing uncertainty. You may observe how certain expectations cause tension inside your body and mind. This observation is not meant to judge yourself. It is meant to understand yourself. As you become more aware of these patterns, you begin recognizing which ones truly belong to your authentic nature and which ones were simply learned behaviors shaped by external pressure. This recognition brings a powerful sense of clarity. Many people believe that self-discovery requires dramatic change, but often it requires something much simpler: honesty. Honesty with yourself about what truly matters to you. Honesty about what drains your energy and what nourishes it. Honesty about the fears that have influenced your decisions in the past. When you practice this kind of honesty, you gradually reconnect with the deeper parts of your mind, that were overshadowed by social conditioning. Another important part of returning to your authentic self is learning to forgive yourself for the years you may have spent living according to expectations that did not truly belong to you. Many people look back on their past with regret. They may feel that they wasted time pursuing goals that did not bring them happiness or staying in situations that limited their growth. But regret often arises when we judge our past with the knowledge we have today. At the time those choices were made, your understanding was different. Your awareness was still developing. The experiences you went through, even the painful ones, contributed to the wisdom you now carry. The Buddha taught that clinging to the past creates unnecessary suffering. Instead of dwelling on what cannot be changed, you can use the lessons from those experiences to guide your present choices. Every stage of life offers new opportunities to reconnect with your authentic nature. Another realization that appears during this journey is that your authentic self does not need to be extraordinary to be meaningful. Society often glorifies dramatic achievements and visible success, which can make people feel as if their lives must be exceptional in order to matter. But the Buddha's teachings remind us that meaning often exists in the simplest forms of awareness. Living honestly, speaking truthfully, treating others with compassion, observing the mind with clarity. These quiet qualities may not attract public attention, but they create a deep sense of peace that external recognition cannot replace. Returning to your authentic self also changes the way you experience time. Many people rush through life, believing that happiness will arrive at some future milestone. They tell themselves that peace will appear once they achieve a certain level of success, financial security, or recognition. But this belief often postpones happiness indefinitely. The Buddha emphasized the importance of the present moment because the present moment is the only place where life actually unfolds. When you are fully present, you realize that many of the things you were chasing already exist in subtle forms around you. The warmth of a conversation with someone you care about, the quiet beauty of nature, the simple satisfaction of completing a meaningful task. These experiences may appear small, but they contain the richness of life itself. When you reconnect with your authentic self, you become more sensitive to these moments. Your awareness deepens, and life begins to feel less rushed. Another powerful aspect of this return is the freedom from comparison. When you know who you truly are, the need to measure your life against others begins to fade. You understand that every person is walking a different journey, shaped by unique experiences and circumstances. Comparison loses its power because you no longer believe that someone else's path defines your worth. This freedom creates mental space for growth. Instead of competing with others, you begin focusing on understanding yourself more deeply. Instead of chasing validation, you begin developing inner stability. Over time, the person you once believed you needed to become becomes less important than the person you already are. This shift is subtle but transformative. You stop trying to perform life correctly. You start living it honestly. The Buddha often spoke about awakening as the process of seeing reality clearly. Returning to your authentic self is part of that awakening. It is the moment when the illusions of comparison, expectation, and fear begin losing their hold over your mind. You realize that the self you were searching for was never truly lost. It was simply waiting beneath the surface, patiently waiting for your awareness to return. And when you finally reconnect with that deeper part of yourself, life begins to feel lighter. You are no longer running toward an imagined version of yourself. You are simply returning home. 14. The strength of living without pretending. One of the most powerful transformations that occurs when a person truly begins to live as themselves is the quiet strength that emerges from no longer pretending. For many people, a large part of daily life is spent maintaining an image. They try to appear confident even when they feel uncertain. They try to appear happy even when their mind is heavy with worry. They try to appear successful even when they feel lost inside. This habit of pretending often becomes so normal that people forget what it feels like to live without it. Pretending may seem harmless at first. In certain situations, adjusting your behavior can be useful. Social life requires a certain level of courtesy and awareness of others. But the problem begins when pretending becomes a permanent way of living rather than a temporary social adjustment. When people spend years maintaining an image that does not reflect their true feelings or values, the mind slowly becomes exhausted. This exhaustion happens because pretending requires constant effort. The mind must monitor how you speak, how you act, and how others might interpret every action. You become extremely aware of other people's opinions because your identity depends on maintaining a particular image in their eyes. Over time, this creates a silent pressure inside the mind. Even moments that should feel relaxing can become stressful because the mind never fully rests. It is always managing how it appears to the world. The Buddha observed this pattern long before modern psychology described it. He understood that human beings often create identities that are built more on illusion than on truth. These identities are shaped by the desire for approval, recognition, and acceptance. While they may bring temporary validation, they rarely bring lasting peace. The moment a person begins living without pretending, something remarkable begins to change. The constant pressure to maintain an image slowly fades. Instead of worrying about how every action will be perceived, you begin acting from a place of honesty. This honesty does not mean expressing every thought impulsively or ignoring the feelings of others. Rather, it means allowing your life to reflect your genuine values and understanding rather than a carefully constructed persona. When you stop pretending, your mind experiences a kind of relief that many people never realized they needed. It is similar to removing a heavy mask that you have worn for so long that you forgot it was there. Suddenly, your energy becomes available for more meaningful purposes. Instead of investing mental effort in maintaining appearances, you can focus on learning, growing, and understanding the world around you. Conversations become more natural because you are no longer trying to perform a role. Decisions become clearer because they are guided by your values rather than by fear of judgment. The Buddha often emphasized the importance of truthfulness. Truthfulness is not only about speaking honestly to others, it also involves being honest with yourself. Many people deceive themselves without realizing it. They convince themselves that certain paths make them happy when, deep inside, they know something is missing. Living without pretending requires the courage to acknowledge these inner truths. For example, someone may realize that the career they chose years ago no longer aligns with their sense of purpose. Another person may recognize that certain relationships in their life are built on obligation rather than genuine connection. These realizations can feel uncomfortable because they challenge the identity you have been presenting to the world. But this discomfort is often the beginning of transformation. When you acknowledge these truths, you begin creating the possibility for change. The path forward may not always be simple, but it becomes authentic. One of the most beautiful aspects of living without pretending is the sense of lightness it brings. Many people carry invisible tension because they are constantly protecting an image. They fear that if others see their imperfections or vulnerabilities, they will lose respect. But when you accept your imperfections honestly, the fear of being exposed disappears. You no longer feel the need to hide aspects of yourself because you understand that imperfection is part of the human experience. The Buddha taught that suffering often arises when people cling to fixed identities. When you believe you must always appear strong, confident, or perfect, you become afraid of any situation that contradicts that image. But when you release that attachment, your mind becomes more flexible. You can admit uncertainty without feeling weak. You can acknowledge mistakes without feeling worthless. You can ask for help without feeling ashamed. This flexibility creates a powerful form of inner strength. Strength does not come from pretending to be invulnerable. It comes from being honest enough to face reality without fear. Living without pretending also changes the way you relate to other people. When someone is constantly performing a role, their relationships often remain shallow. Conversations stay on the surface because the person is focused on maintaining their image rather than expressing genuine thoughts. But authenticity invites authenticity. When you interact with others honestly, you create space for them to do the same. People often feel relieved when they encounter someone who is not trying to impress or compete with them. Your presence becomes calming because it carries sincerity rather than performance. Over time, this sincerity builds deeper connections. You begin forming relationships based on understanding rather than appearance. These relationships may be fewer in number, but they tend to be stronger and more meaningful. Another transformation that happens when you stop pretending is the development of inner stability. When your identity is built on external validation, your emotional state becomes dependent on the reactions of others. Praise may lift your mood temporarily, while criticism can quickly bring it down. But when you live honestly, your sense of self becomes less dependent on external feedback. You appreciate encouragement, but you do not rely on it to feel valuable. You listen to criticism, but it does not destroy your confidence. Your stability comes from knowing that you are living according to your understanding, rather than constantly adjusting yourself to match expectations. The Buddha often described this stability as a form of liberation. It is freedom from the endless cycle of seeking approval and fearing rejection. This freedom allows you to move through life with calm awareness. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth in every situation. You no longer feel pressured to compete with everyone around you. Instead, your energy becomes directed toward understanding life more deeply. This understanding gradually transforms your perspective on success as well. When you are living without pretending, success is no longer defined solely by achievements or recognition. Success becomes living in a way that reflects your values. Success becomes maintaining peace within your mind. Success becomes treating others with kindness while remaining honest with yourself. These forms of success may not always attract public attention, but they create a deep sense of fulfillment. Another powerful result of authenticity is resilience. When you are no longer pretending to be someone else, failures and mistakes lose much of their emotional weight. Instead of seeing them as threats to your identity, you see them as natural parts of growth. This mindset allows you to learn from challenges rather than becoming discouraged by them. The Buddha taught that wisdom grows through direct experience. Each difficulty in life can become a teacher if you approach it with awareness rather than resistance. Living without pretending creates the openness necessary for that learning. Over time, the quiet strength of authenticity becomes visible not only to you, but also to those around you. People may notice that you remain calm in situations that once created stress. They may sense that you are not easily influenced by trends or opinions. This quiet confidence does not come from arrogance. It comes from alignment between your inner understanding and your outward actions. You are no longer divided between who you are and who you pretend to be. You are simply yourself. And in that simplicity, a powerful form of strength appears. It is the strength of honesty, the strength of clarity, and the strength of a mind that is finally free from the exhausting effort of pretending. 15. The deep contentment of living a life that is truly yours. As a person continues the journey of becoming their authentic self, a subtle but powerful transformation begins to appear in the way they experience life. It is not the loud excitement that comes from sudden success or recognition. Instead, it is something deeper and more lasting. It is the quiet contentment that arises when a person realizes they are finally living a life that truly belongs to them. Many people move through life feeling a strange sense of restlessness. Even when things appear stable on the surface, something inside them feels unsettled. They may have achieved goals that once seemed important. They may have followed the path that others encouraged them to take. Yet the mind still feels as if something essential is missing. This feeling of restlessness often comes from living a life that does not fully align with one's true nature. When a person's actions are constantly shaped by external expectations, the mind gradually loses its sense of direction. Decisions are made based on what seems impressive, safe, or socially accepted, rather than what genuinely reflects the person's inner values. Over time, this misalignment creates tension. The outer life may look successful, but the inner life remains uncertain. The Buddha recognized this conflict clearly. He observed that people often search for happiness in achievements, possessions, and recognition, without realizing that true contentment comes from harmony between the mind and the way one lives. Contentment is not simply the absence of problems, it is the presence of alignment. When your actions reflect your values, your life begins to feel coherent. The choices you make are no longer driven by fear or comparison, but by understanding. This alignment creates a sense of peace that is difficult to describe but easy to recognize. You wake up each day with a quiet clarity about how you wish to live. Your goals are not imposed by the pressure of competition, but shaped by your genuine interests and values. Instead of constantly chasing approval, you begin focusing on living honestly. This shift changes the entire experience of life. Many people believe that contentment will arrive once they achieve a certain level of success. They imagine that peace will come after they earn more money, gain recognition, or accomplish impressive goals. But even when those goals are achieved, the mind often continues searching for the next milestone. The Buddha explained that this endless search is fueled by craving, the constant desire for more. Craving creates a cycle where satisfaction never lasts for long. As soon as one desire is fulfilled, another quickly appears. But contentment arises when this cycle begins to slow down. When you are living authentically, your happiness no longer depends entirely on external achievements. You still pursue goals and improvements, but they are no longer the sole source of your peace. Your peace comes from the way you live each moment. For example, someone who values honesty may feel content knowing they speak truthfully even when it is difficult. Someone who values compassion may feel fulfilled through simple acts of kindness. These experiences may appear ordinary to the outside world, but they carry deep meaning for the person who lives them. Contentment also changes the relationship you have with success and failure. When your identity is built on external achievements, failure can feel devastating. It seems as if your worth has been damaged. But when you are living a life that reflects your authentic values, failure becomes less threatening. You understand that mistakes and setbacks are part of growth. Instead of defining yourself by individual outcomes, you focus on the sincerity of your effort and the integrity of your actions. This perspective brings stability to the mind. Even when difficulties appear, your sense of direction remains intact because it is guided by your values rather than temporary results. The Buddha often described this stability as equanimity, the ability to remain balanced regardless of changing circumstances. Equanimity does not mean indifference or emotional coldness. It means having a mind that is not constantly thrown into turmoil by every success or failure. Contentment grows naturally from this balanced state. Another beautiful aspect of living a life that truly belongs to you is the way it deepens your appreciation for simple moments. When people are trapped in the endless pursuit of recognition and achievement, they often overlook the quiet beauty of everyday experiences. They rush from one goal to the next, believing that happiness exists somewhere in the future. But when the mind becomes calmer and more aligned, the present moment begins to reveal its richness. You begin noticing the small details of life that once seemed insignificant. The warmth of sunlight through a window, the peaceful silence of early morning, the gentle sound of rain, the presence of someone you care about sitting beside you. These moments may not appear dramatic, but they contain a quiet joy that constant striving often hides. The Buddha taught that mindfulness allows people to experience life fully rather than rushing past it. When you live authentically, mindfulness becomes easier because your mind is not constantly distracted by comparison or anxiety. You are more present in the life that is unfolding around you. Living a life that truly belongs to you also transforms your relationships. When people live according to external expectations, they often attract relationships based on those expectations. Others may relate to the role you are playing rather than to your authentic self. But when you begin living honestly, your relationships naturally evolve. Some connections may fade because they were built on roles that no longer exist. But new relationships often appear that reflect deeper understanding and shared values. These relationships feel more meaningful because they are based on sincerity rather than appearance. You are no longer trying to impress or compete. You are simply being yourself. This authenticity creates an atmosphere of trust and openness. Another important transformation is the reduction of unnecessary anxiety. When your life is driven by comparison and competition, the mind constantly worries about falling behind others. But when you are living according to your own values, comparison loses much of its influence. You understand that every person is walking a unique journey shaped by different circumstances and experiences. Your path does not need to look like anyone else's to be meaningful. This understanding frees the mind from constant pressure. You can focus on your own growth without feeling threatened by the achievements of others. Contentment grows from this freedom. The Buddha's teachings often emphasize that true happiness is not something that must be created from outside conditions. It emerges naturally when the mind becomes clear and balanced. Living a life that is truly yours allows this clarity to develop. Your mind becomes less cluttered with unrealistic expectations. Your actions become guided by wisdom rather than impulse. Your relationships become more genuine. Your daily experiences become richer because you are fully present within them. Over time, this way of living creates a deep sense of fulfillment. You no longer feel as if you are constantly searching for something missing. Instead, you begin recognizing that much of what you were searching for has been quietly present all along. Peace was not hidden in distant achievements. It was waiting in the simple act of living honestly. And once you realize this truth, the restless search begins to fade. In its place, a quiet contentment appears. A contentment that does not depend on the world constantly rewarding you. A contentment that grows from living a life that is truly your own. 16. The freedom of no longer needing to prove yourself. One of the most liberating realizations that arises as a person continues the journey of becoming themselves is the moment they no longer feel the constant need to prove their worth to the world. Many people spend an enormous portion of their lives trying to demonstrate that they are valuable, capable, intelligent, or successful enough to deserve respect and acceptance. This effort can shape nearly every decision they make. From early childhood, people often learn that recognition and approval are connected to performance. Good grades, achievements, and praise create the feeling that one's value depends on doing something impressive. As people grow older, this pattern continues. The mind begins linking self-worth with accomplishments, social status, and the opinions of others. Because of this conditioning, many individuals unknowingly build their identity around proving themselves. They work tirelessly to gain recognition. They compete constantly with those around them. They feel intense pressure to show that they are successful, capable, or superior in some way. At first, this pursuit can feel motivating. Achievements bring moments of pride and validation. But over time, the need to prove oneself often becomes exhausting. The reason for this exhaustion is simple. No matter how much you achieve, there will always be someone who has achieved more. No matter how impressive your accomplishments may be, there will always be new standards to meet and new comparisons to face. When your sense of worth depends on constant proof, the mind never truly rests. The Buddha observed this pattern as part of the cycle of craving and attachment that creates suffering. People become attached to the idea that their value must be constantly demonstrated through external accomplishments. When recognition appears, they feel temporary satisfaction. When recognition disappears or criticism appears, they feel discouraged or insecure. This cycle can continue for an entire lifetime if it is never questioned. But the journey of becoming yourself slowly breaks this pattern. As your awareness deepens, you begin recognizing that your worth does not actually come from proving anything to anyone. Your value is not something that must be constantly defended or displayed. Instead, it arises naturally from understanding your own mind and living according to your values. When this realization begins to settle into your awareness, an incredible sense of freedom appears. The constant pressure to compete, impress, and validate yourself starts to dissolve. You no longer feel the need to prove that you are intelligent in every conversation. You no longer feel compelled to demonstrate success in every situation. You no longer measure your life against the achievements of others. This does not mean that you lose ambition or motivation. Instead, your motivation changes. You still work hard and pursue meaningful goals, but the energy behind those actions comes from curiosity, growth, and purpose, rather than from insecurity. The difference between these motivations is profound. When you act from insecurity, every effort carries pressure. Success feels necessary for maintaining your sense of identity. Failure feels like a threat to your self-worth. But when you act from authenticity, your efforts become expressions of your values rather than tests of your worth. You work because you care about what you are doing, not because you are trying to prove that you are worthy of respect. This shift creates enormous psychological relief. The mind becomes calmer because it is no longer constantly evaluating itself against others. You are no longer asking, "Am I good enough?" every time you enter a new situation. Instead, you simply show up as yourself. The Buddha often described this state as freedom from attachment to identity. When people cling tightly to a certain image of themselves, they become anxious about protecting that image. For example, someone who believes they must always appear strong may fear showing vulnerability. Someone who believes they must always appear successful may hide their struggles. But when you release attachment to these rigid identities, you become more flexible and honest. You can admit when you do not know something without feeling embarrassed. You can acknowledge mistakes without feeling ashamed. You can learn and grow without the constant fear of judgment. This openness strengthens your mind rather than weakening it. Ironically, when people stop trying to prove themselves, they often appear more confident and trustworthy to others. Authenticity carries a natural strength that cannot be imitated through performance. People sense when someone is comfortable with themselves. That comfort creates an atmosphere of calm and reliability. The Buddha emphasized that true confidence arises from understanding rather than from comparison. When you understand your own mind and values, you no longer need external confirmation to feel stable. Your confidence becomes quiet rather than loud. Another powerful benefit of releasing the need to prove yourself is the freedom it brings to your relationships. When someone is constantly trying to demonstrate their worth, interactions with others often become competitive. Conversations may turn into subtle contests of knowledge, status, or accomplishment. People may feel the need to impress others rather than truly listening to them. But when you no longer feel the need to prove yourself, Your interactions become more genuine. You can listen without planning how to respond impressively. You can appreciate other people's achievements without feeling threatened by them. You can share your experiences honestly rather than presenting an exaggerated image. These changes create deeper and more meaningful connections with others. Relationships become less about competition and more about understanding. Another transformation occurs in how you approach challenges. When people believe they must constantly prove themselves, they often avoid situations where failure is possible. They may hesitate to try new things because mistakes could damage their image. But when your identity is not dependent on constant success, you become more willing to explore unfamiliar experiences. Failure becomes part of learning rather than something to fear. This openness allows your skills and understanding to grow more naturally. The Buddha often taught that wisdom develops through direct experience. Avoiding mistakes may protect the ego, but it prevents deeper learning. By releasing the need to prove yourself, you create space for curiosity and exploration. Over time, this mindset also reduces the anxiety that many people carry about their future. When your worth is tied to achievements, the future becomes a constant source of pressure. You feel responsible for maintaining an image of success. But when you understand that your value is not dependent on constant proof, the future becomes less threatening. You can pursue goals without the fear that failure will define you. You can make decisions based on understanding rather than insecurity. This creates a sense of calm confidence that supports long-term growth. The Buddha often reminded his followers that life is constantly changing. Success and failure are temporary conditions, not permanent identities. When you internalize this truth, you stop clinging to achievements as evidence of your worth. Instead, you focus on living wisely and compassionately in the present moment. Your life becomes less about proving something to the world and more about understanding the nature of your own mind. This shift brings deep peace. The constant race for recognition slows down. The pressure to compare fades. The need to perform disappears. In its place, a quiet freedom emerges. You are no longer living to impress anyone. You are simply living. And in that simplicity, the mind finally finds rest. 17. The peace that comes from letting life be what it is. As a person moves deeper into the journey of becoming themselves, another profound realization begins to appear. It is the understanding that peace does not come from controlling every aspect of life. Instead, it comes from learning how to let life unfold naturally without constantly resisting what cannot be changed. Many people spend enormous energy trying to force life into the shape they believe it should have. They create expectations about how events should happen, how people should behave, and how their future should unfold. When reality does not match these expectations, frustration and disappointment appear almost immediately. This habit of resisting reality is one of the main sources of suffering that the Buddha observed in human life. The mind often believes that happiness will come only when everything happens according to its plans, but life rarely follows a perfect script. Situations change unexpectedly, people behave unpredictably, and circumstances evolve in ways we cannot fully control. When the mind insists that reality must match its expectations, tension begins to build. For example, a person may expect others to always understand their intentions. When misunderstanding occurs, they feel hurt or angry. Someone may expect their career to progress smoothly without obstacles. When challenges arise, they feel discouraged or defeated. Others may expect relationships to remain stable forever, only to feel devastated when change inevitably arrives. The problem in these situations is not always the events themselves. The deeper problem often lies in the resistance that the mind creates against them. The Buddha taught that suffering increases when we cling too tightly to how we believe things should be. This clinging creates a constant struggle between reality and expectation. But when a person begins to accept life as it is, something remarkable happens. Acceptance does not mean giving up or becoming passive. It simply means recognizing reality clearly without adding unnecessary resistance. When you accept the fact that life contains uncertainty, your mind becomes more flexible. Instead of reacting with frustration whenever something changes, you begin adapting with awareness. This flexibility creates peace. Imagine standing in the middle of a strong river current while trying to force the water to move in a different direction. The harder you push against the current, the more exhausted you become. But if you learn how to move with the current while guiding your direction wisely, the effort becomes far less painful. Life often works in a similar way. When we constantly fight against the natural flow of events, we create unnecessary suffering. But when we learn to move with life while maintaining awareness, the journey becomes smoother. The Buddha often described this understanding through the concept of impermanence. Everything in existence is constantly changing. Emotions appear and disappear, relationships evolve, circumstances shift. Even our thoughts and identities transform over time. When people ignore this truth, they often become attached to temporary conditions. They want pleasant experiences to last forever and unpleasant experiences to disappear immediately. But impermanence is not something we can escape. When you begin accepting this reality deeply, your relationship with life changes dramatically. Pleasant moments become more precious because you know they will not last forever. Instead of taking them for granted, you appreciate them fully while they are present. Difficult moments also become easier to face because you understand that they are temporary as well. Painful emotions and challenging situations will eventually pass, just as every previous difficulty in your life has passed. This understanding brings emotional balance. You no longer feel overwhelmed by temporary events because you see them within the larger rhythm of life. Another powerful result of accepting life as it is the reduction of unnecessary mental struggle. Many people replay situations in their minds repeatedly, wishing that something had happened differently. They imagine alternative outcomes and dwell on regrets about the past. But no amount of mental replay can change what has already occurred. The Buddha taught that clinging to the past creates suffering because the mind is trying to control something that no longer exists. Acceptance allows you to release that struggle. Instead of resisting the past, you acknowledge it as part of your life story. The lessons remain, but the emotional weight begins to dissolve. Similarly, many people spend enormous energy worrying about the future. They imagine potential problems and prepare mentally for situations that may never actually occur. This constant anticipation creates anxiety because the mind is attempting to control events that have not yet happened. But when you accept that the future cannot be completely predicted or controlled, your attention returns to the present moment. And the present moment is the only place where life can actually be lived. The Buddha emphasized mindfulness as a way to reconnect with the present. When your mind becomes attentive to the moment you are in, much of the unnecessary stress created by past regrets and future worries begins to fade. You begin experiencing life directly rather than constantly analyzing it. The warmth of a conversation, the quiet movement of nature, the simple rhythm of breathing, these experiences become more vivid when the mind is not distracted by resistance. Acceptance also transforms how you interact with other people. Many conflicts arise because individuals expect others to behave in ways that match their personal preferences. When those expectations are not met, frustration quickly appears. But when you understand that every person has their own thoughts, experiences, and struggles, your reactions become more compassionate. You stop trying to control how others should behave. Instead, you focus on responding with patience and clarity. This approach reduces unnecessary conflict and allows relationships to develop more naturally. The Buddha often emphasized compassion as a companion to wisdom. When you accept life as it is, Compassion grows because you recognize that everyone is navigating their own challenges and uncertainties. Another transformation that occurs when you let life be what it is the development of resilience. When people constantly resist reality, unexpected events can feel overwhelming. But when you accept that change and uncertainty are natural parts of life, your mind becomes more adaptable. Challenges still appear, but they no longer feel like personal attacks from the universe. Instead, they become experiences that require understanding and patience. Resilience grows from this perspective. Rather than collapsing under pressure, you learn how to adjust your response and continue moving forward. The Buddha taught that peace does not come from controlling the external world, but from understanding the internal world of the mind. When your mind stops fighting every change and every difficulty, a quiet freedom appears. Life becomes less about forcing outcomes and more about participating in the unfolding of each moment with awareness. This does not mean you abandon goals or stop working toward meaningful improvements. It simply means that your effort is balanced with acceptance. You act wisely while understanding that not everything can be controlled. This balance creates harmony. Over time, the practice of letting life be what it is brings a deep sense of calm. The mind becomes lighter because it is no longer carrying the impossible burden of controlling every outcome. You learn to trust the natural unfolding of life while remaining attentive to your choices. And in that balance between effort and acceptance, a profound peace emerges. It is the peace that comes from understanding that life does not need to be forced into perfection. It simply needs to be lived with awareness, patience, and openness. When you allow life to be what it is, you finally stop fighting the current, and that is when the journey becomes peaceful. 18. The wisdom of no longer running from yourself. As a person continues the long journey of becoming their authentic self, one of the most powerful realizations that eventually appears is the understanding that true peace begins the moment you stop running from yourself. Many people spend years, even decades, trying to escape certain parts of their own mind. They avoid uncomfortable emotions, suppress painful memories, and distract themselves whenever deep reflection begins to arise. At first, this habit seems natural. Human beings instinctively move toward pleasure and away from discomfort. When difficult thoughts appear, the mind often looks for ways to silence them quickly. People immerse themselves in work, entertainment, social media, or endless activity in order to avoid sitting quietly with their own inner world. But the Buddha observed that avoiding the mind does not actually remove suffering. In many cases, it only hides it temporarily. The emotions and thoughts that are ignored do not disappear. Instead, they remain beneath the surface of awareness, quietly influencing behavior, reactions, and decisions. For example, a person who avoids examining their fears may continue making choices based on those fears without realizing it. Someone who refuses to acknowledge unresolved anger may find that anger appearing unexpectedly in other areas of life. A person who avoids confronting sadness may discover that a subtle sense of emptiness follows them wherever they go. Running from yourself may delay discomfort for a short time, but it often prolongs confusion in the long run. This is why the Buddha emphasized awareness as one of the most powerful tools for liberation. Awareness means turning your attention inward with honesty rather than avoidance. It means observing your thoughts, emotions, and habits clearly, even when they feel uncomfortable. At first, this practice can feel difficult. When people begin facing their inner world honestly, they may encounter emotions that were previously buried under years of distraction. Old fears, regrets, and insecurities may rise to the surface of awareness. But the important truth is that these emotions were already present before awareness revealed them. Awareness simply allows you to see what was already there. And once something is seen clearly, it can begin to transform. The Buddha often compared awareness to a light entering a dark room. When a room has been dark for a long time, turning on the light may reveal dust, clutter, or objects that were previously hidden. But the light itself is not creating those objects. It is simply revealing them so they can be understood and addressed. The same process occurs when you stop running from your own mind. You begin noticing patterns in your thinking that previously operated automatically. You may observe how certain situations trigger anxiety or how particular memories influence your reactions. You may see how expectations and comparisons quietly shape your sense of identity. This observation does not require judgment. The goal is not to criticize yourself for having certain thoughts or emotions. The goal is simply to understand them. When you understand something clearly, it begins to lose its power over you. For example, imagine someone who constantly fears rejection. Without awareness, that fear may silently control their actions. They might avoid expressing their opinions, hesitate to pursue opportunities, or withdraw from situations where they might be judged. But when that fear becomes visible through awareness, something changes. Instead of acting automatically under its influence, the person can observe the fear as a temporary experience rather than an absolute truth. This shift creates space between the emotion and the action, and within that space, wisdom can arise. The Buddha taught that suffering often grows stronger when people resist their own emotions. When we try to push feelings away, the mind becomes tense and defensive. The emotion may disappear briefly, but it often returns later with greater intensity. But when you allow emotions to be observed calmly, they begin to lose their overwhelming power. Anger becomes easier to understand rather than something that must be suppressed. Sadness becomes an experience that can be felt and released rather than avoided indefinitely. Fear becomes a signal that can be examined rather than an authority that must be obeyed. This process requires patience. The mind has developed certain habits over many years, and those habits rarely disappear instantly. But each moment of honest awareness weakens the patterns that once controlled your reactions automatically. Over time, the inner world becomes less frightening. Instead of something to escape from, it becomes something to learn from. Another powerful transformation occurs when you stop running from yourself. Self-compassion begins to grow. Many people treat themselves with harsh judgment whenever they notice weaknesses or mistakes. They criticize their own emotions and feel ashamed when they experience doubt or insecurity. But awareness reveals that these experiences are part of the human condition. Every person struggles with uncertainty, fear, and emotional complexity. The Buddha encouraged kindness toward oneself as well as toward others. Compassion means recognizing suffering without condemning it. When you observe your own mind with compassion, the inner environment becomes much healthier. Instead of battling yourself, you begin working with your mind in a supportive way. Growth becomes easier when the mind feels understood rather than attacked. This compassion also reduces the fear of self-examination. Many people avoid looking inward because they worry about what they might find. But when awareness is combined with kindness, self-discovery becomes less threatening. You realize that the purpose of awareness is not to judge your past or punish your mistakes. Its purpose is to bring clarity so that wiser choices can be made in the present. Another benefit of facing yourself honestly is the development of emotional resilience. When people constantly avoid uncomfortable feelings, even small difficulties can feel overwhelming. But when you become familiar with your emotions through awareness, they begin to feel less intimidating. You learn that emotions rise and fall like waves. They appear, reach their peak, and eventually fade. This understanding reduces fear. Instead of panicking when strong emotions appear, you observe them with curiosity and patience. Resilience grows from this practice. The Buddha often taught that freedom arises when people understand the nature of the mind rather than blindly reacting to it. When you stop running from yourself, you begin understanding how your thoughts and emotions operate. This understanding allows you to respond to situations with wisdom rather than habit. Life becomes less reactive and more intentional. You are no longer constantly escaping from discomfort through distraction. Instead, you develop the ability to remain present with whatever experience is unfolding. This presence brings deep peace. The mind becomes quieter because it is no longer divided between avoidance and awareness. Your inner world becomes a place of exploration rather than something to escape. Over time, the fear of self-reflection fades completely. You realize that nothing within your mind is too frightening to be observed with awareness. Even the most difficult emotions can become teachers. They reveal the parts of yourself that require attention, healing, or understanding. When you stop running from yourself, life becomes simpler. You no longer waste energy hiding from your own thoughts. You no longer fear the quiet moments when reflection naturally appears. Instead, those moments become opportunities for insight. The Buddha described enlightenment as a state where a person sees reality clearly without illusion. Facing yourself honestly is one step along that path. Each moment of awareness removes a little more confusion from the mind. Each moment of honesty strengthens your connection with your authentic self. And slowly, you discover something beautiful. The person you once tried to escape was never your enemy. They were simply waiting to be understood. 19. The courage to release the stories that no longer serve you. As a person continues the journey of becoming their authentic self, another powerful realization begins to emerge. Much of the suffering people carry in their lives is not always caused by present circumstances, but by the stories they continue telling themselves about who they are, what they deserve, and what their life means. These stories often begin forming early in life, shaped by experiences, expectations, disappointments, and moments of pain that leave deep impressions on the mind. At first, these stories appear harmless. They seem like simple explanations the mind creates in order to understand what has happened. A person who experiences rejection may begin telling themselves that they are not worthy of love. Someone who faces failure may start believing they are not capable of success. A child who grows up in a critical environment may form the belief that they must always prove their value in order to be accepted. Over time, these beliefs slowly become part of a person's identity. They stop feeling like temporary interpretations and begin feeling like absolute truths. The mind begins organizing experiences according to these internal stories, often reinforcing them repeatedly. For example, if someone believes they are not good enough, their mind may focus more strongly on situations that confirm that belief. Even small mistakes may feel like powerful evidence that the story is true. At the same time, moments of success or kindness from others may be dismissed or overlooked because they do not match the established narrative. The Buddha observed this process clearly. He understood that the human mind has a natural tendency to create stories in order to interpret experiences. While these stories can sometimes help us make sense of the world, they can also trap us in patterns of thinking that limit our freedom. The problem arises when we forget that these stories are interpretations rather than absolute reality. When a person begins the journey of becoming themselves, awareness slowly reveals these internal narratives. You begin noticing the assumptions that quietly guide your reactions and decisions. You may recognize certain beliefs that have been influencing your life for many years without being questioned. This recognition can feel surprising at first. Many people do not realize how deeply their identity has been shaped by these stories. They may have accepted certain beliefs about themselves simply because they have repeated them for so long. But awareness creates a new possibility. When you recognize a story within your mind, you gain the ability to examine it rather than automatically believing it. Instead of accepting every thought as truth, you begin asking deeper questions. Is this belief actually accurate? Where did this story begin? Does it still reflect reality today? Or has it simply continued out of habit? The Buddha taught that wisdom arises when we examine our thoughts carefully rather than clinging to them blindly. Many beliefs lose their power when they are observed with clarity. For example, someone who has long believed they are incapable may discover that this belief began during a specific period of difficulty earlier in their life. Perhaps they faced criticism from authority figures, experienced failure during a challenging time, or compared themselves constantly with others. But as life continued, their circumstances and abilities may have changed. Yet, the old story remained active within the mind. When this pattern becomes visible, the person gains an opportunity to release it. Releasing a story does not mean denying past experiences. It simply means recognizing that those experiences do not have to permanently define your identity. The Buddha often taught that attachment creates suffering. This includes attachment to identities that were formed in the past. When you cling to a story about who you are, your mind begins defending that identity even when it limits your growth. For example, if someone believes they are always unlucky, they may unconsciously overlook opportunities that contradict that belief. If someone believes they are not creative, they may avoid activities that could reveal their creativity. In this way, stories about the self can quietly shape the boundaries of a person's life. But when those stories are questioned, the boundaries begin to expand. Releasing limiting narratives requires courage because the mind often feels comfortable with familiar identities, even if they are painful. Familiar stories provide a sense of certainty, while letting them go introduces uncertainty. But uncertainty also opens the door to freedom. When you stop clinging to old stories, you begin experiencing yourself with fresh awareness. Instead of viewing every situation through the lens of past beliefs, you respond more directly to what is actually happening. The Buddha emphasized the importance of direct experience. Rather than allowing the past to dictate every interpretation, he encouraged people to observe life as it unfolds in the present moment. This practice gradually weakens the influence of old narratives. You begin seeing that your identity is not fixed or permanent. It is constantly evolving through your choices, experiences, and understanding. Each moment offers an opportunity to respond differently than before. For example, someone who once believed they were shy may discover that their quiet nature also allows them to listen deeply and observe carefully. Instead of seeing their personality as a weakness, they begin recognizing its strengths. Similarly, a person who once saw themselves as overly sensitive may realize that their sensitivity allows them to empathize with others and notice emotional subtleties that others overlook. When limiting stories are released, the same qualities that once felt like flaws may reveal unexpected strengths. Another powerful result of releasing old narratives is the reduction of unnecessary guilt and regret. Many people carry stories about past mistakes that continue influencing how they see themselves. They may believe that one failure defines their entire character. But the Buddha taught that human beings are constantly changing. The person you were years ago is not the same person you are today. Your understanding has evolved, your awareness has grown, and your choices have been shaped by new experiences. When you release the belief that your past permanently defines your identity, you create space for growth. Mistakes become lessons rather than life sentences. The courage to release old stories also transforms the way you approach the future. Instead of believing that your life must follow patterns established by the past, you begin recognizing the freedom available in each new moment. The future becomes less predictable, but far more open. You begin responding to opportunities with curiosity rather than fear. Your decisions become guided by present awareness rather than outdated beliefs. The Buddha described this state as freedom from illusion. Illusion arises when the mind clings to ideas about reality that are no longer accurate. When these illusions dissolve, clarity appears. Life begins to feel less restricted. You are no longer living according to a script written by past experiences. You are participating in the unfolding of your life with fresh awareness. Over time, this freedom creates a deep sense of empowerment. You realize that your identity is not something permanently assigned by circumstances. It is something that continues evolving through your awareness and choices. Each moment becomes an opportunity to respond wisely rather than repeating old patterns automatically. And as you continue releasing the stories that no longer serve you, something remarkable happens. The mind becomes lighter, the past loses its grip, and the future begins to feel wide open with possibility. The person you once believed you were slowly fades into the background, and the person you are becoming begins to emerge with clarity, freedom, and quiet confidence. 20. The quiet joy of simply being yourself. As a person continues walking the long path of self-discovery and inner understanding, there comes a moment when something subtle yet deeply powerful begins to appear in their life. It is not the dramatic excitement that society often celebrates. It is not the loud success that attracts attention or applause. Instead, it is something much quieter and much deeper. It is the simple joy that comes from finally allowing yourself to be exactly who you are. For many people, life feels like a constant performance. From a young age, individuals often learn that they must shape themselves in ways that earn approval from others. They try to behave in ways that will be accepted by family, teachers, friends, and society as a whole. They adjust their personality, their opinions, and sometimes even their dreams to fit the expectations placed upon them. At first, these adjustments may feel small. A person may change the way they speak in order to avoid criticism. They may hide certain interests because they fear they will be judged. They may choose a career path that appears respectable, even if it does not truly inspire them. Over time, however, these small adjustments accumulate. Years pass, and a person may suddenly realize that much of their life has been shaped by the desire to fit into the world rather than to understand their own nature. The Buddha observed this tendency clearly in human life. He saw that people often become trapped in endless attempts to satisfy expectations that are constantly changing. Society's standards evolve, people's opinions shift, and new comparisons always appear. When happiness depends on meeting these external expectations, the mind becomes restless. But when a person begins to reconnect with their authentic self, the entire experience of life begins to change. The performance gradually fades. Instead of constantly asking, "How should I behave so others will approve?" the mind begins asking a different question: "What feels honest and meaningful to me?" This shift may seem small, but its effects are profound. When you begin living according to your true nature, many of the pressures that once controlled your decisions lose their influence. You no longer feel the same urgency to compete with everyone around you. You no longer feel the need to constantly prove that your life is impressive. Instead, your attention returns to the simple experience of living. This return to simplicity creates a quiet joy that many people overlook. Joy does not always appear through extraordinary events. Often it emerges through small moments that become meaningful when the mind is fully present. The warmth of sunlight on your face, the calm silence of early morning, the sound of wind moving through trees, a conversation that feels genuine and unforced. When the mind is no longer distracted by constant comparison and pressure, these moments begin to shine with a quiet beauty. The Buddha emphasized mindfulness because it allows people to experience these moments fully. When the mind is present rather than rushing between past regrets and future worries, life reveals a richness that is often hidden by distraction. Living as your authentic self makes this presence easier. When you are no longer performing for others, your mind becomes less divided. There is no longer a gap between who you truly are and how you present yourself to the world. Your life begins to feel integrated rather than fragmented. This integration brings peace. You no longer need to monitor every word you speak or every action you take. Your behavior flows naturally from your values and understanding. Instead of constantly adjusting yourself to meet expectations, you allow your personality to express itself honestly. Another beautiful result of this authenticity is the freedom it brings to relationships. When people are constantly trying to impress or compete with others, relationships often become tense or superficial. Conversations revolve around achievements, appearances, or social status. But when you are comfortable being yourself, interactions become more relaxed. You listen more attentively because you are not focused on preparing impressive responses. You speak more honestly because you are not trying to maintain an image. This sincerity creates deeper connections with others. People often feel more comfortable around someone who is genuine rather than someone who is performing. The Buddha taught that compassion and understanding grow naturally when people drop their masks. When you are not hiding behind an artificial identity, you become more sensitive to the experiences of others. You recognize that everyone is navigating their own challenges and uncertainties. This awareness softens the heart. Relationships become less about competition and more about shared humanity. Another transformation that appears through authenticity is the reduction of unnecessary fear. Many fears arise from the belief that we must maintain a certain image. People worry about making mistakes because they believe those mistakes will damage how others see them. But when you are comfortable being yourself, mistakes lose much of their power. You understand that imperfection is part of being human. Instead of hiding from mistakes, you learn from them. Instead of fearing criticism, you evaluate it with calm awareness. This perspective creates resilience. Challenges still appear, but they no longer threaten your identity. The Buddha often reminded his followers that suffering arises when people cling too tightly to identities and expectations. When you release that clinging, the mind becomes more flexible. Life becomes less about defending an image and more about exploring experience with curiosity. Over time, this mindset changes how you view success as well. Success is no longer defined only by achievements or recognition. Instead, success becomes the ability to live honestly without constant internal conflict. Success becomes maintaining peace in your mind. Success becomes acting with kindness and clarity even when situations become difficult. These forms of success may not attract public attention, but they bring deep fulfillment. Another powerful aspect of living authentically is the sense of gratitude that begins to grow. When the mind is no longer obsessed with comparison, it becomes easier to appreciate what is already present. Instead of constantly focusing on what is missing, you begin noticing what is available: your abilities, your experiences, your relationships, the opportunities that appear each day. Gratitude naturally grows from this awareness. The Buddha often described gratitude as an antidote to dissatisfaction. When the mind learns to appreciate what is present, the endless search for more begins to slow down. Contentment arises. This contentment does not mean abandoning growth or ambition. It simply means that your happiness is no longer postponed until some distant achievement. You are able to experience joy within the life that is unfolding right now. Living as your authentic self also creates a sense of stability during difficult times. When people build their identity entirely on achievements or external validation, setbacks can feel devastating. But when your identity is grounded in self-understanding, challenges become experiences rather than definitions. A difficult moment does not determine your worth. A mistake does not erase your value. Your sense of self remains steady because it is rooted in authenticity. This steadiness allows you to move through life with calm determination. The Buddha often spoke about liberation as the state where a person is no longer trapped by illusions about identity and happiness. Living authentically brings you closer to that liberation. You realize that the happiness you were chasing through approval, comparison, and achievement was never completely satisfying because it depended on unstable conditions. But the joy of simply being yourself does not depend on external validation. It arises naturally when the mind stops pretending. When you allow yourself to live honestly, life becomes lighter. The pressure fades. The performance ends. And in its place appears a quiet joy that is simple, steady, and deeply real. The joy of finally being free to be yourself. 21. The freedom of no longer comparing your life to others. As a person continues the journey of becoming their authentic self, one of the most liberating transformations that begins to take place is the gradual disappearance of constant comparison. Many people spend a large part of their lives measuring themselves against others without even realizing how deeply this habit influences their happiness. From a young age, individuals are often encouraged to compete, to compare achievements, and to evaluate their worth according to how they perform relative to others. This pattern begins in school, when children are compared through grades, rankings, and recognition. As people grow older, comparison expands into many areas of life. It appears in careers, financial success, physical appearance, relationships, and even personal happiness. Social media and modern communication have intensified this habit by constantly displaying curated images of other people's lives. Without careful awareness, the mind begins to interpret these images as standards. Someone else's success may make you question your own progress. Another person's happiness may create the feeling that your life is somehow incomplete. Even small differences can trigger a quiet sense of dissatisfaction. The Buddha observed that this pattern of comparison is closely connected to the mind's tendency to create attachment and craving. When the mind constantly compares, it rarely feels satisfied with the present moment. There is always someone who appears more successful, more admired, or more accomplished. Because of this, comparison often creates a silent race that never truly ends. At first, this race may appear motivating. People may believe that comparison pushes them to improve and work harder, but over time, it often produces the opposite effect. Instead of inspiring genuine growth, it creates pressure, insecurity, and a constant feeling that you are somehow falling behind. When a person begins the journey of becoming themselves, awareness slowly reveals how deeply comparison has shaped their perception of life. You begin noticing how quickly the mind evaluates your experiences against the lives of others. You may realize that moments that once felt satisfying suddenly feel less meaningful when compared to someone else's achievements. This recognition is the beginning of freedom. Once you see the habit of comparison clearly, you gain the ability to question it. The Buddha taught that every human life unfolds according to unique conditions. Each person is shaped by different experiences, environments, talents, opportunities, and challenges. Because of this, comparing two lives as if they follow the same path is fundamentally unrealistic. Imagine two travelers beginning their journeys from completely different starting points. One may travel through smooth roads, while another must navigate mountains and rivers. Judging their progress according to the same timeline ignores the uniqueness of their circumstances. Human lives are similar. Every individual carries a different history, different strengths, and different obstacles. When you compare your life directly to someone else's, you are ignoring the countless factors that make each path unique. The Buddha encouraged people to turn their attention inward rather than outward when seeking understanding. Instead of asking whether your life measures up to others, you begin asking whether your life reflects your own values and understanding. This shift transforms the entire experience of living. When comparison fades, your energy returns to your own journey. Instead of constantly observing what others are doing, you begin paying closer attention to your own growth. You notice the progress you have made over time. You recognize the challenges you have overcome. You appreciate the lessons that have shaped your understanding. Growth becomes personal rather than competitive. Another powerful change occurs in how you experience other people's success. When the mind is trapped in comparison, someone else's achievements can feel threatening. You may unconsciously interpret their progress as evidence that you are somehow lacking. But when comparison fades, this perception changes completely. You can celebrate the success of others without feeling diminished by it. You understand that their journey is separate from your own. Their achievements do not reduce your potential or invalidate your progress. This understanding creates a sense of generosity in the mind. Instead of competing constantly, you begin supporting and encouraging others. Relationships become more harmonious because they are no longer influenced by hidden rivalry. The Buddha taught that compassion and joy for others are essential qualities of a peaceful mind. When comparison disappears, it becomes easier to genuinely feel happy for the good fortune of others. Another important result of releasing comparison is the restoration of inner peace. Comparison constantly directs attention toward what is missing. The mind focuses on gaps between your life and the lives of others. Even when many aspects of your life are meaningful and fulfilling, comparison can make them appear insufficient. But when this habit weakens, your attention returns to the present moment. You begin noticing the richness that already exists in your life, your relationships, your experiences, your personal growth, the opportunities available to you today. Gratitude naturally grows when the mind is no longer obsessed with measuring itself against others. The Buddha often described gratitude as a powerful antidote to dissatisfaction. When people recognize the blessings already present in their lives, the endless desire for more begins to soften. Contentment appears. Contentment does not mean abandoning ambition or personal growth. It simply means that your happiness is not postponed until you surpass someone else. You can pursue goals with enthusiasm while still appreciating where you are today. Another transformation appears in the way you approach your own abilities. Comparison often convinces people that their talents are insignificant because someone else appears more skilled. A person may avoid exploring their interests because they believe they will never match the achievements of others. But when comparison disappears, creativity and curiosity return. You begin pursuing activities simply because they interest you, not because you expect to outperform others. This freedom allows your natural abilities to develop more fully. The Buddha often emphasized that each individual possesses unique qualities that can contribute to the world. When people stop comparing themselves constantly, those qualities have space to emerge. Instead of trying to imitate someone else's path, you begin discovering what feels authentic for you. Over time, the absence of comparison creates a deeper sense of confidence. This confidence does not depend on being better than others. It comes from understanding yourself. You know your strengths. You recognize your areas for growth. And you accept both with clarity and patience. Life becomes less about competition and more about participation. You participate in your own journey fully, rather than constantly measuring your progress against the journeys of others. The Buddha taught that suffering often arises when people cling to illusions about identity and success. Comparison strengthens those illusions by convincing the mind that happiness depends on surpassing others. But when comparison fades, the illusion weakens. You realize that your worth does not depend on how your life looks next to someone else's. Your worth comes from living honestly, learning continuously, and acting with compassion. This realization brings deep freedom. You are no longer running a race against the world. You are simply walking your own path. And when you walk your path with awareness and sincerity, each step becomes meaningful. Not because it proves something to others, but because it reflects the truth of who you are becoming. 22. The power of trusting your inner voice. As a person continues walking the path of becoming their authentic self, another powerful transformation begins to unfold within the mind. It is the gradual discovery of the inner voice that has always existed quietly beneath layers of fear, expectation, and outside influence. For many people, this voice has been ignored for so long that they hardly recognize it when it finally begins to speak again. Yet, learning to trust this inner guidance is one of the most important steps toward living a life that truly belongs to you. From childhood onward, people are surrounded by voices that attempt to shape their decisions. Parents, teachers, friends, cultural traditions, and society as a whole all offer opinions about what kind of life should be pursued. Some of these influences are helpful and necessary because they provide guidance and protection during early stages of life. However, as people grow older, the constant presence of outside advice can gradually overshadow their own internal understanding. Many individuals reach adulthood without ever learning how to listen to their own inner voice. Instead of asking themselves what feels meaningful or true, they become accustomed to looking outward for direction. Decisions are often made according to what others expect, what appears respectable, or what seems most secure according to social standards. Over time, this habit creates distance between a person and their authentic self. The mind becomes filled with external opinions, while the quiet voice of inner understanding grows faint. When people lose connection with this voice, they often feel uncertain about the direction of their lives. Even when they follow the advice of others successfully, something inside may still feel incomplete. The Buddha observed this condition clearly. He taught that wisdom does not arise merely from accepting teachings or instructions from others. True wisdom develops when a person learns to observe their own mind and understand their experiences directly. This does not mean rejecting guidance from others entirely. Advice and knowledge from teachers can be valuable, but the Buddha emphasized that every individual must ultimately examine their own experience and discover what leads to clarity and peace. Learning to trust your inner voice begins with developing awareness. The mind often produces many thoughts each day, and not all of them represent genuine wisdom. Some thoughts are shaped by fear, others arise from habit or comparison with others. Distinguishing between these voices requires patience and observation. Through mindfulness, you begin noticing the difference between the anxious voice that reacts quickly and the deeper voice that speaks calmly. The anxious voice often pushes you toward decisions based on fear or urgency. It may tell you that you must act immediately in order to avoid judgment or failure. This voice often feels loud and demanding. The deeper voice, however, is usually quieter. It does not shout or pressure you. Instead, it speaks with a sense of calm clarity. When you listen carefully, this voice often encourages choices that align with your values rather than choices designed simply to impress others. For example, imagine someone deciding between two career paths. One option may promise prestige, financial success, and admiration from society. The other option may feel more meaningful personally, but appear less impressive according to external standards. The anxious voice may immediately favor the path that promises recognition because it fears disapproval or insecurity. But the deeper voice may gently remind you which direction aligns more closely with your genuine interests and values. Recognizing this difference takes time. Many people have spent years prioritizing external approval over inner understanding. Reconnecting with the inner voice requires patience and repeated practice. The Buddha encouraged individuals to create moments of stillness in their lives. Through meditation and mindful reflection, the mind gradually becomes quieter. When the constant noise of distraction begins to fade, the inner voice becomes easier to hear. Silence becomes an important teacher in this process. In moments of stillness, you begin noticing subtle feelings that guide your decisions. Some choices create a sense of calm, clarity inside your mind. Others may produce tension or hesitation. These feelings often contain valuable information about whether a decision aligns with your authentic nature. Trusting your inner voice also requires courage. The path it suggests may not always match what others expect from you. Following your inner guidance sometimes means making choices that appear unconventional or difficult to explain. People around you may question those choices because they do not see the same perspective you do. But the Buddha reminded his followers that wisdom often requires independence of thought. Living according to your understanding may not always bring immediate approval from others, yet over time it creates a deeper sense of alignment within your own life. Another important aspect of trusting your inner voice is learning from experience rather than seeking perfection in every decision. Sometimes the path you choose will lead to unexpected challenges, but challenges do not necessarily mean that your inner guidance was wrong. Every path contains lessons that contribute to growth. The Buddha emphasized that understanding develops gradually through experience. When you make choices based on your inner understanding, even difficulties become opportunities for learning. Over time, this process strengthens your trust in yourself. You begin noticing that your inner voice becomes clearer when you listen to it consistently. Each decision, guided by authenticity, reinforces your connection with your true nature. Confidence grows naturally from this process. This confidence is different from the loud certainty often displayed in competitive environments. It is quieter and more stable because it comes from self-understanding rather than comparison. You trust your decisions not because you believe you are always right, but because you know you are acting honestly according to your awareness. Trusting your inner voice also transforms the way you interact with others. When people constantly seek validation from external sources, relationships can become influenced by approval and dependency. Individuals may adjust their opinions to match the expectations of those around them. But when you trust your own understanding, your interactions become more authentic. You listen to others with openness while still maintaining your own perspective. This balance allows genuine dialogue rather than silent conformity. The Buddha often encouraged thoughtful inquiry rather than blind agreement. When people trust their inner awareness, they become capable of engaging with ideas more deeply. They can learn from others without losing their own sense of direction. Another powerful result of trusting your inner voice is the reduction of anxiety about the future. Many worries arise because people feel uncertain about their path. They fear making the wrong decision or disappointing others. But when your choices are guided by inner understanding, the pressure to meet external expectations becomes less intense. Even if the future remains uncertain, you feel confident that you are moving in a direction that feels true to you. This confidence creates peace. The Buddha taught that the mind becomes calm when actions are aligned with wisdom and compassion. When you trust your inner voice, your life gradually reflects this alignment. Your decisions become clearer. Your relationships become more sincere. Your goals become more meaningful. And your sense of identity becomes more stable. Over time, you begin realizing that the guidance you were searching for in the outside world has been quietly present within you all along. It was never absent. It was simply waiting for you to listen. When you finally learn to trust that voice, life becomes less confusing and more authentic. You are no longer wandering through endless expectations. You are walking your own path with clarity, awareness, and quiet confidence. 23. The courage to walk alone without feeling lonely. As a person moves deeper into the journey of becoming their authentic self, there comes a stage that many people find both powerful and challenging at the same time. It is the stage where you begin to walk your path with greater independence. The decisions you make start reflecting your own understanding rather than the expectations of the crowd. Your priorities shift. Your perspective changes. And gradually, the path you are walking may look different from the path many people around you are following. At first, this experience can feel uncomfortable. Human beings naturally desire connection and belonging. From the earliest stages of life, people learn that acceptance within a group brings safety and comfort. Being part of a family, community, or social circle provides emotional support and a sense of identity. Because of this natural desire for belonging, many individuals hesitate to follow their own path if it means stepping away from the expectations of others. They may silence their inner voice because they fear being misunderstood. They may abandon certain dreams because they worry about losing approval or companionship. But the Buddha observed that true self-discovery often requires moments of solitude, not necessarily physical isolation, but the inner courage to stand by your understanding, even when others may not immediately agree with it. This stage of the journey is often misunderstood. Many people believe that walking your own path means becoming lonely or disconnected from the world. But in reality, there is a difference between being alone and feeling lonely. Loneliness comes from feeling disconnected or rejected. It arises when a person believes they have lost meaningful connection with others. But being alone, when embraced with awareness, can become a powerful space for growth and clarity. The Buddha spent long periods of time in solitude during his journey toward awakening. These moments allowed him to observe his mind without the distractions of constant social influence. In silence and stillness, he discovered insights that later became the foundation of his teachings. Solitude does not mean rejecting relationships or withdrawing from society completely. Instead, it means allowing yourself the space to understand your own thoughts and values without constantly adjusting them to match the expectations around you. When you begin trusting your inner voice, you may notice that certain aspects of your life start to change. Some conversations that once felt comfortable may begin to feel less meaningful. Certain habits or environments may no longer align with your values. Some relationships may shift as you become more honest about who you are. These changes can feel unsettling at first, but they are often signs of growth. When you begin living authentically, your life gradually aligns with your deeper understanding. The path becomes clearer, even if it sometimes leads you away from familiar patterns. The courage to walk alone does not mean rejecting others. It means refusing to abandon your own truth in order to maintain approval. This courage is one of the most powerful forms of strength a person can develop. Many people follow the crowd because it feels safer. If everyone else is moving in the same direction, it is easier to avoid criticism or uncertainty. But the Buddha taught that wisdom does not always follow the majority. The crowd may chase success, wealth, or status without questioning whether these pursuits bring lasting peace. When a person begins asking deeper questions about life, they may find themselves walking in a different direction. At first, this path may feel unfamiliar, but it also offers something precious: clarity. Instead of constantly adjusting your life to fit external expectations, you begin shaping it according to your own understanding. Walking this path requires patience because the results may not appear immediately. Authentic living often unfolds gradually. Each decision guided by awareness builds a stronger foundation for the future. Over time, the fear of walking alone begins to fade. You begin discovering that solitude can bring a unique sense of freedom. When you are not constantly influenced by comparison or social pressure, your mind becomes calmer. You can reflect more deeply. You can observe life more clearly. This clarity strengthens your connection with yourself. Another important realization appears during this stage of the journey. When you walk your own path with honesty, you eventually attract people who appreciate you for who you truly are. At first, some relationships may drift away because they were built around roles or expectations that no longer reflect your identity. But new connections often appear that are based on genuine understanding. These relationships feel different. They are not built on competition or approval. Instead, they are grounded in mutual respect and authenticity. The Buddha emphasized that wise companionship is one of the most valuable supports on the path of personal growth. When people connect through shared values rather than social expectations, their relationships become sources of encouragement and learning. Walking alone for a time may be necessary in order to find those deeper connections. During this stage, another important transformation occurs. Your sense of identity becomes less dependent on constant social validation. Many people feel secure only when they receive regular approval from others. They look for reassurance through compliments, recognition, or attention. But when you develop the courage to stand by your own understanding, your confidence becomes more stable. You still appreciate support from others, but your sense of self no longer collapses when approval is absent. This stability creates inner peace. The Buddha often described inner peace as the result of understanding rather than external success. When you understand your values clearly and act according to them, your mind becomes less vulnerable to the shifting opinions of others. Criticism may still appear, but it no longer controls your emotional state. You learn to listen thoughtfully without losing your direction. Walking your path also deepens your compassion for others. When you recognize the courage required to follow your own truth, you become more understanding toward the struggles of others. You see how many people are quietly searching for their own direction while feeling pressure to conform. This awareness softens your judgment. Instead of criticizing those who follow different paths, you appreciate the complexity of each person's journey. Compassion grows naturally from this understanding. Another gift of walking your own path is the sense of purpose it brings. When your actions reflect your authentic values, life begins to feel more meaningful. Even simple activities carry a sense of intention because they align with your understanding. You are no longer simply moving through life according to expectations. You are participating consciously in your own journey. Over time, the fear of solitude transforms into appreciation for quiet reflection. You realize that moments of aloneness provide the space necessary for insight and creativity. The Buddha often spoke about the importance of balancing connection with contemplation. Both are necessary for a healthy and meaningful life. Solitude allows you to understand yourself. Connection allows you to share that understanding with others. When these two aspects are balanced, life becomes rich and fulfilling. The courage to walk alone without feeling lonely is not about rejecting the world. It is about standing firmly within yourself while remaining open to meaningful relationships. It is about trusting your path even when it looks different from the paths around you. And when you walk this path with awareness and sincerity, something beautiful begins to appear. The fear of isolation fades. In its place grows a quiet confidence, a confidence that comes from knowing you are living honestly, not according to the expectations of the crowd, but according to the truth of who you are becoming. 24. The wisdom of letting go of the person you thought you had to be. As a person continues walking the path of self-discovery and inner awakening, there comes a profound moment when they realize that much of their struggle in life came from trying to become someone they believed they had to be. For years, sometimes for decades, people quietly carry an invisible blueprint of the person they think they should become. This blueprint is rarely created by their own understanding. Instead, it is shaped by expectations from family, society, culture, and the countless comparisons that appear throughout life. Many individuals grow up believing that there is a specific version of themselves that will finally be worthy of happiness. They imagine that once they become successful enough, admired enough, disciplined enough, confident enough, or perfect enough, Then they will finally feel at peace with themselves. Until that imagined version appears, the mind keeps whispering that something is still missing. Because of this belief, life often turns into a continuous attempt to improve or reshape oneself into an idealized identity. People push themselves constantly, believing that happiness lies somewhere in the future version of themselves. They try to eliminate every flaw, correct every weakness, and constantly refine the image they present to the world. But the Buddha observed that this constant striving often leads to suffering rather than peace. The problem is not personal growth itself. Growth and learning are natural parts of life. The problem arises when a person becomes attached to an unrealistic image of who they think they must become in order to feel worthy. This attachment creates tension within the mind. Instead of appreciating the person they are today, individuals begin treating their present self as incomplete or inadequate. They feel as if they are constantly chasing a version of themselves that exists only in imagination. But something remarkable begins to happen when a person reaches the point where they start letting go of this imagined identity. Letting go of the person you thought you had to be does not mean abandoning growth or responsibility. Instead, it means releasing the pressure to conform to expectations that were never truly yours. When this release begins, the mind experiences an unexpected sense of relief. For the first time, you stop measuring your life against an imaginary standard. You stop asking whether you are impressive enough, successful enough, or admired enough according to the rules created by society. Instead, you begin asking a much simpler and more honest question. What kind of life actually feels meaningful to me? The Buddha often taught that suffering arises when people cling to illusions about identity. These illusions can appear in many forms. Some people cling to the belief that they must always appear strong. Others cling to the idea that they must always be successful or admired. But when these identities are examined carefully, it becomes clear that they are fragile. Life changes constantly. Circumstances shift. People experience both success and failure, praise and criticism, confidence and doubt. Trying to maintain a perfect identity in a constantly changing world creates endless pressure. Letting go of this pressure allows the mind to relax. You begin realizing that you do not need to become extraordinary in order to live a meaningful life. You simply need to live honestly. This realization opens the door to self-acceptance. Many people believe that self-acceptance will make them complacent or prevent them from improving, but the opposite is often true. When you accept yourself honestly, growth becomes healthier and more natural. Instead of trying to improve because you feel inadequate, you grow because you are curious and engaged with life. Learning becomes joyful rather than stressful. Another transformation appears when you release the identity you thought you had to maintain. You become more flexible. When people cling tightly to a fixed image of themselves, they often feel threatened whenever life challenges that image. A person who believes they must always be confident may feel ashamed when they experience doubt. Someone who believes they must always succeed may feel devastated when they encounter failure. But when you stop clinging to rigid identities, these experiences become easier to navigate. You understand that confidence and uncertainty can coexist. You accept that failure can be part of learning. You recognize that personal growth often requires experimentation and mistakes. This flexibility creates resilience. Life becomes less frightening because you are no longer trying to protect a fragile image. Instead, you allow yourself to evolve naturally through experience. The Buddha emphasized that human identity is not fixed. The self is constantly changing as thoughts, experiences, and awareness develop over time. Understanding this impermanent nature of identity allows you to move through life with greater ease. You do not need to trap yourself inside a single version of who you are. You are free to grow, learn, and transform. Letting go of the person you thought you had to be also transforms your relationship with success. Society often defines success through visible achievements such as wealth, recognition, and status. These achievements can certainly bring comfort and opportunity, but they do not guarantee inner peace. Many people who achieve these goals still feel restless because they pursued them according to external expectations rather than internal values. But when you release those expectations, success begins to look different. Success becomes living in alignment with your values. Success becomes maintaining clarity and kindness in your actions. Success becomes cultivating understanding and compassion in everyday life. These forms of success may not always attract public recognition, but they create a deep sense of fulfillment. Another important change occurs in your relationships. When people try to become someone they are not, their relationships often revolve around maintaining that image. Conversations may become performances rather than genuine expressions. But when you allow yourself to be authentic, relationships become more relaxed. You no longer feel the need to impress others constantly. You can speak honestly without fear of damaging your image. You can admit uncertainty and ask questions without feeling embarrassed. This authenticity creates stronger connections. People often feel more comfortable around someone who is genuine rather than someone who appears perfect. The Buddha taught that compassion grows naturally when people release attachment to rigid identities. When you accept your own imperfections, you become less judgmental toward the imperfections of others. Understanding replaces criticism. Patience replaces frustration. Kindness replaces comparison. Over time, this mindset creates a peaceful environment within your relationships and within your own mind. Another powerful benefit of letting go of the identity you thought you had to maintain is the freedom it brings to your daily life. You no longer feel the need to constantly monitor how others perceive you. Your actions become simpler. Your decisions become clearer. Your mind becomes quieter. Instead of chasing approval, you begin focusing on living with awareness. Instead of comparing yourself with others, you appreciate the path that belongs to you. Instead of striving to become someone else, you allow your authentic self to emerge naturally. The Buddha described liberation as the moment when the mind stops clinging to illusions. Letting go of the person you thought you had to be is one step toward that liberation. You realize that the image you were chasing was never necessary for happiness. Peace was never waiting in the future version of yourself. It was always available the moment you stopped trying to be someone else. When you release that pressure, life becomes lighter. You begin experiencing moments of quiet contentment. Moments where you simply exist without needing to prove anything. Moments where you feel comfortable in your own presence. These moments gradually grow into a steady sense of peace. And in that peace, you discover something profound. You were never required to become someone extraordinary. You only needed the courage to become yourself. 25. The deep peace that comes when you stop fighting yourself. As a person moves further along the path of becoming their authentic self, one of the most profound transformations they experience is the moment they stop fighting themselves. Many people do not realize how much of their inner struggle comes not from the outside world, but from the quiet conflict happening inside their own mind. For years, sometimes for most of their lives, individuals may live with the feeling that certain parts of themselves are unacceptable. They may dislike their personality traits, criticize their emotions, or constantly compare their abilities with others. The mind becomes divided, as if two voices are living inside the same person. One voice says, "You should be different." The other voice quietly responds, "But this is who you are." This internal battle often becomes so familiar that people stop noticing it. Yet, it quietly drains enormous mental energy. Instead of living freely, the mind becomes locked in an endless attempt to correct, hide, or reject parts of itself. Some people fight their natural personality because they believe it does not fit the expectations of society. A quiet person may try to force themselves to appear outgoing. A sensitive person may try to suppress their emotions in order to seem strong. Someone who values peace may push themselves into competitive environments because they believe success requires aggression. But the Buddha observed that this constant struggle against one's own nature creates suffering. When a person rejects parts of themselves, the mind becomes tense and restless. Even moments of success may feel incomplete because the inner conflict remains unresolved. True peace begins when this battle finally ends. This does not mean that a person stops growing or improving. Instead, it means that growth comes from understanding rather than rejection. Instead of fighting your own mind, you begin learning from it. The Buddha taught that awareness is the first step toward liberation. When you observe your thoughts and emotions with clarity, you begin recognizing that the mind contains many different experiences, but none of them need to become enemies. Anger may appear, fear may arise, sadness may visit unexpectedly, but these experiences are temporary states of mind, not permanent definitions of who you are. When people fight their emotions, they often become stronger. Resistance creates tension. The more the mind tries to push something away, the more attention it gives to that experience. But when you observe emotions calmly, they begin to lose their intensity. For example, imagine a person who frequently feels anxious. If they believe that anxiety is unacceptable, they may constantly criticize themselves for feeling that way. This criticism creates a second layer of stress on top of the original emotion. The mind begins saying, "I should not feel this way." But when anxiety is observed with awareness instead of judgment, something changes. The person begins recognizing the sensation without adding resistance. They see how the emotion appears, rises, and eventually fades. Through this observation, anxiety loses some of its power. The Buddha often described this process as learning to watch the mind like clouds passing through the sky. Thoughts and emotions appear, but they do not need to control your identity. Another powerful aspect of stopping the internal battle is self-compassion. Many people treat themselves more harshly than they would ever treat another person. They replay mistakes repeatedly and criticize themselves for not meeting unrealistic expectations. But compassion toward yourself creates a different environment within the mind. When mistakes occur, you acknowledge them honestly, but you also allow yourself to learn from them without shame. Growth becomes possible when the mind feels safe rather than attacked. The Buddha emphasized compassion as a central part of wisdom. Compassion is not weakness. It is the understanding that every human being experiences struggle, confusion, and imperfection. When you extend compassion toward your own mind, the inner conflict begins to soften. Another transformation occurs when people stop fighting themselves. They begin recognizing that many of the qualities they once disliked actually contain hidden strengths. For example, sensitivity can become empathy, introversion can become deep reflection. Caution can become thoughtful decision-making. Qualities that once seemed like weaknesses may reveal themselves as valuable parts of your character. But these strengths can only appear when the mind stops rejecting them. Instead of forcing yourself into a personality that does not fit, you begin discovering how your natural qualities can contribute to the world. This discovery brings confidence. Not the loud confidence that tries to impress others, but the quiet confidence that comes from self-understanding. Another result of ending the internal struggle is the restoration of mental energy. When the mind is constantly fighting itself, enormous energy is wasted on self-criticism, comparison, and resistance. But when that struggle ends, this energy becomes available for more meaningful purposes. You can focus on creativity. You can deepen relationships. You can pursue knowledge and growth with curiosity rather than pressure. Life begins to feel lighter. The Buddha often spoke about the middle way, the path between extremes. When applied to self-understanding, this teaching suggests avoiding both self-indulgence and harsh self-rejection. The middle way encourages balance. You acknowledge your strengths without arrogance. You recognize your weaknesses without condemnation. You understand that both are part of the human experience. This balanced perspective creates emotional stability. When people constantly fight themselves, they often experience dramatic swings in self-confidence. One moment they feel proud, and the next they feel ashamed. But when the internal conflict fades, the mind becomes more stable. You are no longer trying to prove your worth through perfection. Instead, you accept yourself as a human being who is continuously learning and evolving. This stability also changes the way you approach challenges. When someone is fighting themselves, every mistake feels like confirmation that something is wrong with them. But when you accept yourself, mistakes become lessons rather than evidence of failure. You become more willing to try new things because you are no longer afraid of discovering flaws. Curiosity replaces fear. The Buddha taught that suffering often arises when people cling to rigid identities. When you believe you must always be a certain way, life becomes fragile. But when you accept that identity is flexible and evolving, your mind becomes resilient. You adapt more easily to change. You learn from experience. You continue growing without feeling threatened by imperfection. Another beautiful result of stopping the internal battle is the sense of inner silence that begins to appear. When the mind is no longer arguing with itself, a quiet space opens within awareness. In that space, thoughts become clearer, emotions become easier to understand, decisions become more thoughtful. This silence allows wisdom to emerge naturally. The Buddha often described peace not as something that must be created, but as something that appears when unnecessary struggle ends. When you stop fighting yourself, that peace begins to reveal itself. Life does not suddenly become perfect. Challenges still appear. Difficult emotions still arise. But the relationship you have with those experiences changes. Instead of reacting with frustration or self-criticism, you respond with understanding. You treat yourself with the same patience you would offer to someone you care about. And gradually, a deep sense of peace grows inside your life. It is the peace of no longer being divided against yourself. It is the peace of accepting your humanity. It is the peace of realizing that you were never meant to become someone else. You were simply meant to understand yourself. And when that understanding appears, the long battle inside the mind finally comes to an end. At the end of this long journey of reflection, one truth becomes clearer than anything else. The greatest transformation in life does not come from becoming someone extraordinary in the eyes of the world. It comes from understanding who you truly are and having the courage to live according to that understanding. Many people spend years chasing identities that were never truly theirs. They try to meet expectations that constantly change. They compare themselves endlessly with others. They fight their own emotions, hide their natural personality, and believe that happiness exists somewhere in a future version of themselves that has not yet arrived. But the wisdom taught by the Buddha gently reveals a different path. Peace does not come from chasing a perfect identity. It comes from letting go of the illusion that you must become someone else in order to deserve happiness. When you stop comparing your life with others, your mind becomes quieter. When you stop trying to prove your worth, your heart becomes lighter. When you stop fighting your own nature, the inner conflict begins to dissolve. And slowly, something beautiful begins to appear. Clarity. You begin to understand your own mind more deeply. You recognize the thoughts, fears, and expectations that once controlled your life. Instead of running from them, you observe them with patience and awareness. Compassion. You begin treating yourself with the same kindness you offer to others. Mistakes become lessons rather than punishments. Imperfection becomes part of the human journey rather than something to hide. Freedom. You no longer feel trapped inside the expectations of the crowd. Your life becomes guided by your values, your understanding, and your inner voice. This freedom does not make you distant from the world. In fact, it allows you to connect more deeply with others because you are no longer pretending. Your presence becomes calmer. Your relationships become more sincere. Your actions become more meaningful. The Buddha taught that awakening is not about escaping life. It is about seeing life clearly. And when you see clearly, you realize something profound. You were never required to become a perfect version of yourself. You were never meant to compete endlessly with the world. You were never meant to live behind a mask. You were simply meant to wake up to your own nature, to understand your mind, to live honestly, to walk your path with awareness and compassion. And when that understanding begins to guide your life, something extraordinary happens. The pressure fades, the noise quiets, the search finally ends, because the person you were trying to become was never far away. It was always you, waiting patiently for the moment. You had the courage to simply be yourself.